Okay, perfect. So today we are going to be looking at JavaScript and some of the pretty advanced topics in JavaScript. The only advanced topic I know that it's not here is the concept of OOP in JavaScript, but I purposely removed that because I don't want us to do anything today that will take way too much time without us understanding it well. So we are going to be starting with the basis, or not really the basis. We're going to be starting with these topics here: functions and arrow functions. Then we'll move on to talk about objects. Then we'll move on to talk about arrays, and we'll look at some of the common, more very popular array methods. I'm talking about methods like pop, shift, unshift, splice, and so on and so forth. We'll also look at destructuring. You see this particular topic here? When I found out about this thing, I was very, very happy because it makes it very easy for you to break down your array items or even your JavaScript objects. That's why we are going to be looking at arrays and objects first before looking at destructuring. When we are done, we'll move on to look at what we refer to as template literals, and then ternary operator, and then ES modules. This topic, very important for those of you who want to go into React and any front-end technologies. You are going to be importing, you are going to be exporting. This one is very, very, very common. So without much talk, let's just get started. So to get started, what I'm going to do is I'll create a new folder in my desktop, and I'm just going to call this JS Advanced. And I'll go ahead and open that up in Visual Studio Code. That's the text editor we'll be using today, or the code editor we'll be using today. For those of you using a different code editor, please feel free. It's just a writing space. Okay, now to make this a lot easier for all of us, I'm going to split my screen into two so we don't have to go back and forth to go check the output of our code and then come back again. So I'll split that into two. And the first thing I'm going to do we even need to use, we'll hardly write HTML code, so we might not need the browser. But let's go ahead and create our JavaScript file. I'll just create a file called app.js. I guess most of us can do this already. Create a file called app.js, and that is taking time. What is that? File create participants. You're taking too much time. Come on. All right. Okay. Why is that taking time? Sometimes VS Studio does this and I don't like that. All right, good. So our app is created. Now, if you have Node.js in your laptop, for those of you already doing Node as backend, or even React or Angular or Vue, you know that you need to install Node.js before you start using them. If you actually have Node.js on your laptop, you can use Node.js to run your JavaScript code without having an HTML file. And that's probably what we'll be doing today. So we don't have to be going back and forth into HTML and back to VS Code. Let me increase my font size a bit. We'll just go with maybe 22 and see how that is. Let's just do a console.log, and in here we just log tech width, save in there. And to run this, I can bring up my terminal. Okay, to bring up your terminal in VS Code, you can click on this terminal option, say new terminal, or you press Ctrl J on your keyboard, which is what I prefer doing. So I'll just do a Ctrl J, and this will bring this up. Now, as I explained earlier, if you are writing just JavaScript, which we are going to be doing in this class, just pure JavaScript, you don't have to you don't have to create an HTML file. You guys, by now, I know you understand how JavaScript and HTML works. In order for JavaScript to run in the browser, you have to include it in a script tag in your HTML file. then you run the HTML file on your browser, and that would execute your JavaScript file. But we are not going to be doing that today because we don't want to write HTML code. So our major focus is just going to be on JavaScript. So because of that, I'm going to be running JavaScript on my terminal here. And like I said, to do that, you have to have Node. Node is a package for JavaScript. So if you come to just search for Node on your browser, you see it here, Node.js. If you click on Node.js, you can go ahead and download the version you want here. But what I recommend is go for this recommended for most users. Don't go with this latest feature, because sometimes the latest feature might have breaking changes there, and it's why you're learning. You don't want to be battling with things not working because of the current changes. So always go with this option here that has a long-term support. For now, at least, unless you're very, very, very experienced, you can go with this option. That being said, I have Node installed. That is why I can do what I'm about to do now. So to compile this JavaScript file here, all I have to do is say Node followed by the name app.js. If I hit enter, that should run that for us, but it's not running. What happened? Or just say app.js. App.js is not recognized. Okay, Node is not running. Did I change my node? Just a minute. Let me see why that is not working. So what am I doing wrong? Let me see that. Okay, no. Yeah, this should work. Console.log. Tech with Steven. You know what? Let's create an HTML file first and make sure this is working. I don't know why that is not working, but let's try to debug that together. So I'll create an HTML file. Let's call this index.html. Okay, we'll generate the basic HTML template here, and we'll just go ahead and include our script file. So create a script, set the source equal to our app.js. So let's open this in live server. Let's open that with live server. And if I go to the browser, we should be able to go to localhost. Where is that? Localhost 127. Yeah, that should give us that file there. Okay, so if we inspect elements now and go to the console, we should see what we expect. So let's inspect. Okay, so if we come to the console, okay, the app.js is running. So why is Node not working? Node should run this for us. Node app.js. You see, it's now working now. Oh God, this was supposed to work before. We did all of that. It did not work. Okay, let's close our HTML file. This is working now. Sometimes these things just happen, and that's why as a developer, you don't have to get frustrated. You see, now it's working. So we don't need this browser anymore. As a developer, you don't have to get frustrated. There are things you know should work, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't work. Just keep calm. Try it again. If it gives you too much headache, close your laptop, walk around, take a nap, wake up, come back to it. All right? Okay, good. So we have this running here. The first thing we want to look at in this class is functions. Functions. Now, what are functions? Well, we already, I think for those of you that have attended one of my former classes or so, you would know we've talked about functions before, and we said the function, I like defining it as this. A function is a reusable block of code designed to perform a particular task. A function is a reusable block of code designed to perform a particular task. Now, why do we define it like that? Let's first of all see how we write functions. We'll come back to that definition and break it down. So in JavaScript, to write a function, all you have to do is start with a function keyword, okay? Then, now I just said something, keywords. What are keywords? Now, for those of us, if you remember English classes, those classes where we really don't pay attention then. But if you remember English classes, you will know there's this thing in English they call a register, right? Can anybody help us out with what that is? A register in English. Basically, it's just talking about the words that are being used in a particular field or setting. Okay? Or sometimes they might refer to it as jargons. When you go to a hospital now, you will be hearing things like doctor, patient, surgery, and so on and so forth. When you go to a football field, you start hearing things like a goal, a referee, a player, and so on and so forth. So those words, okay, are common to those fields or career. That's why we call them registers or jargons. Now, in programming, in every programming language, we have things we refer to as keywords. A keyword is just a particular word that has meaning to the translator of that particular language. And when you're coding in any programming language and you write a particular word and you see immediately that it is colored in a particular way. For example, the moment I wrote functions, did you see the color changed? Know that that word is probably a keyword in that language. And one thing you should know about keywords is you don't use them as your variable names or your function names. Keep that at the back of your mind. You don't use them because the compiler or the translator might be confused in that regard. So to write a function in JavaScript, you go with the keyword function, okay? Then open and close brackets there. But before that, you have to give the name of the function. Okay, you give the name of the function. Let's say we want to write a function, first of all, to greet somebody. So I can say function greet, okay, then open and close brackets. Then you go ahead and open and close parentheses. Now, curly bracelets, sorry. In between this curly bracelets is where you want to write the code that will be inside the function, okay? Just the opening and the closing. Now, we said a function to greet somebody, right? So let's just do a console.log. Then inside this function, we'll just say hello and save that, okay? Now, this is a function right now. But if I go ahead and run this program, you see nothing shows up. It does not run. We don't get hello on the console. This is because a function can only execute when it is being invoked or when it is being called. So until you call a function, it doesn't execute. Until you call a function, it doesn't execute. For those of us who watch these Nollywood movies or African Magic, you will notice whenever they are going to call their gods, they have to actually call the name of the god before the god answer. Although sometimes they'll have to call 3 times and so on and so forth. But that's like a function. You actually need to invoke it before it works. Now, if I go on top of this function and I do a console.log and I say hello and I save this, okay? Oh no, let's say hello from outside the function, and let's change this to hello from inside the function. If I save this and I go ahead and execute this now, you see hello from outside the function is executed, but we don't get hello from inside the function. But like I said, in order for this function to execute, you need to call it. How do you call a function? Simple. Call the name and open and close brackets. That means write the signature of the function. So we just say greet, then open and close brackets. Watch what happens when I run this again. Okay, I need to actually save that. Did you see this now? It says hello from inside the function. I think I know what happened before that our Node app was not running. I did not save that file. So Ctrl S was what I did not do. Anyways, you can see this now. Because I've called this function by name, it is working fine now. Now, let's go further on functions. Now, let's say instead of saying hello from inside the function, let's actually write something like hello, command, how are you doing? We want to say this to somebody's name. Let me pick a name here. I'm going to pick Shegun is here. Shegun, welcome and thanks for joining us. We'll say hello, how are you doing, Shegun? Now, if I go ahead and execute this now, you see we get hello, how are you doing, Shegun? But the thing is this, if we call this function here now and we run, it says hello, how are you doing, Shegun? But if you look at the definition that I gave on function, I said they are reusable block of code, right? They are reusable. What do we mean by a function is reusable? Now, in order for this function to execute, we needed to call it. But watch the magic when I call it twice. Just say greet again and go ahead and execute this. You see, okay, I need to save that. Let me turn on my autosave. I hate having to forget to save. All right, I just turned on autosave in VS Code. What that means now is whenever I edit a file, VS Code would autosave it for me. I don't have to do Ctrl S again. So let's come back here now. You see, we get hello, how are you doing, Shegun twice. We get that twice. Let me reduce this setting a bit. So let's do 18. Yeah, that's better. So we get hello, how are you doing, Shegun twice. That's because I called the function twice. If I call it again, of course, you guess what will happen? The function will execute again. So if I go ahead and run this again now, it calls it 3 times. So every time you call the function, what JavaScript will do is, whenever you create a function and you save it, JavaScript will register the name of that function. So whenever you call the name of the function or you invoke it, JavaScript will execute the function. Which means if you write a function once and you call it 20 times, JavaScript will execute that function 20 times. That's why we say a function is a reusable piece of code or block of code. Okay, so now this function as it is now, it's not really flexible. What I mean is this: every time you call this function, it's going to say hello, how are you doing to Shegun. But what if every time we call it, we want it to change this name? It shouldn't be saying hello to Shegun all the time. We want to spice it up. Well, on the function, you can register what we call a parameter. A parameter is like a variable that you want a function to use. So how do we define that parameter? You see, where we wrote the function, in between this open and closing bracket here is where you want to put the parameter. So in this case, we want to tell it that we'll be passing a name to it. Okay, we just told it we'll be passing a name to it. Now, the data type of this parameter doesn't really matter because JavaScript is not strongly typed. In some programming language, for those of you that have coded in another programming language like before, like C#, Java, and co, you know you have to declare the data type of that variable. But in JavaScript, just write the name of the variable. Now, instead of saying hello, how are you doing to Shegun, I'm going to get rid of Shegun there and do a plus name. So I'm saying whatever, concatenate hello, how are you doing to whatever name is passing. Now, how do we now pass in this name to the function? Well, it's pretty simple. When you are calling the function, pass in the name in this open brackets here. So inside the open and close bracket, I can say it should pass in Shegun. Let's get rid of these 2 other calling. If I go ahead and execute this again now, you see it says it still works. Hello, how are you doing, Shegun? Now, if I change Shegun to another name, Bola, and I save that and I run that, it says hello, how are you doing, Bola? You see that? So that means if I call this function 5 times or 3 times, and every time I change the name I'm passing inside. So let's change Shegun here. Let's have Shegun there. So we have Bola, Shegun. Let me look for another person's name here. We have Mike here. So I save this. If I go ahead and execute this now, you say it says, hello, how are you doing, Bola? Hello, how are you doing, Shegun? And hello, how are you doing, Mike? All the 3 times we call this function, it executes and passing the name we pass in here, and then the function would execute and say hello to that name. Now, this is how you can make a function more usable. Instead of it doing the same thing over and over and over again, you spice it up, you make it more usable. Because it is when a function is dynamic that it can be really useful to you. Imagine we are working on a fintech app to be transferring money now. We don't have to write the app to transfer money to a particular account number. We don't have to tie the account number inside the function. We can make the function dynamic in such a way that whenever we want to transfer money, we pass the account and the bank of that person to the function, and the function does the transfer, which means in our app now, we can just have one function for transferring money. Every time you call the function, you pass in the accounts of the person and the bank of the person, and boom, the function does its job. Okay, so that is one very usefulness of functions. Now, you can pass in more than one parameter inside a function. All you need to do is put a comma, okay, when you're passing in the next one. So if I want to pass in name and age, I'll say name, comma, age. So let's spice this up a bit. Hello, how are you doing? Plus the name. Then let's also say you are. Then we want to say how many years old. So we'll come here and concatenate the age. Okay. Then we do a plus and say years old. Okay, you see now we are passing 2 different parameters to this function, a name parameter and an age parameter. If you're confused with the name parameter, these are just variables too. But unlike how you declare your other variables, if you want to declare a variable, you will say something like name equal to whatever you want to set it equal to. Okay, Mike, I'll give you time for questions. Just keep your questions, or you can write it down so you don't forget, okay? Okay, so now we just pass in the variables as parameters here, and we use it inside the function. Now, when calling this function now, you have to specify, okay? You have to pass in the age too. So let's say Bola is 23, Shegun is 25, and Mike is, I'm just guessing age here. If your name is here and I'm putting the wrong age, don't get pissed off about that. Let's say Mike is 30. So if I go ahead and run this now, you see it works fine. Hello, how are you doing, Bola? You are 23 years old. Hello, how are you doing, Shegun? You're 25, and so on and so forth. All right, Mike, what's your question? Mike, please unmute your mic and talk to us. What's your question? Or was that a mistake? Your raise of hand, was it a mistake? Mike, if you can hear me, please go ahead and ask your question. Okay, Friday, good morning. What's up? What's your question?
Okay, Stevie, good morning, sir.
Morning, boss.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
No problem.
I wouldn't know, I thought you wanted to finish before you attempt, you probably call for questions. I'm not talking about the entire class. I'm talking about probably this function first.
Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. If you've got a question, use the chat section, drop the question there. Then I'll be picking the question to respond to it, so it doesn't just cut the class and all that, okay? All right, let's do that. If you've got a question, drop it in the chat section. I will be looking at the chat and get back to you on that. Okay, the chat is open on my screen here. I would see it and then I will reply you, okay? All right, great. So this is just the basis of functions in JavaScript. So you can declare parameters, and when you're calling the function, you pass in the parameters. Now up here we call these parameters. So up here we call these parameters. When you are actually passing it in, you might hear some people call these arguments. Okay, you might hear people call these arguments. So the parameters of this function is the name and age, and the arguments are the actual value you are passing. So Bola and 23, Shegun 25, Mike 30. These are the arguments we are passing to the function. So when you hear the term argument, don't think it's something two-way complex. They are just the values you are passing to your functions. Okay, so when you're declaring the function, or when you are declaring the function, you specify the parameters that the function need. And when you are calling the function, you pass in the argument. Now, what happens if we call this function and we don't pass in any arguments? Let's see that in action. Let's comment these other ones out, and let's run this now and see what we get. You see, it says you are undefined years old, and it says hello, how are you doing, undefined. So when you create a function and you tell it to expect a parameter, and then you call the function without passing the parameters, by default it will set the name to undefined and the age to undefined. In other words, it will set all the parameters to undefined. And what undefined means in JavaScript is simple. It says you did not define it. That's what undefined means. So the question from our chat session says, please, can you explain why the function ran when it was not called? No, it did not run when it was not called. Watch this. Let me comment this out. Currently, I'm not calling the function. Okay, as you can see, if I run this now, you see the function did not execute. This hello from outside the function you are seeing is outside. Okay, not inside the function. The only code that will not run when you don't the only code that ran here was this code outside our function. If I comment that out, let's delete this terminal and start all over again. You see that nothing shows up because we did not call the function. So if I call the function again now and I execute this program, you see now it's running. And of course, because we did not pass the name and age, we are getting undefined. Undefined again, like I said, it means you did not define the values for name and age. Another question says, am I to download Node before I can run JavaScript? The answer is no. Okay, the answer to that question is no. All you need for you to run JavaScript is your browser. But why I'm not using that approach is because if you want to run JavaScript that way, you have to create an HTML file, include your JavaScript link, and then you have to be using the browser. Without the browser, JavaScript would not run. So you have to be using the browser, which is what we had earlier. Okay, it's opening on my other screen. Let me just copy the link and close that. So you have to use the browser. And me, I want to avoid us going back and forth. That's why I'm using the terminal. Okay, and it's because I'm using the terminal that I have to have Node installed. You can see if I right click now, inspect this page, come to the console. If I come to my console, you see that it runs. Hello, how are you doing? Undefined. You are undefined years old. It still runs fine. But because I want to avoid going back and forth, that's why I'm using Node to run it on my terminal. So to run it on my terminal now, that's why I need Node. All right, good. So this is our positional argument here. So based on the position of the argument is how it is passed to it. So 70 is given to name here, and Steven is given to age. So what you want to always make sure when working with JavaScript is you watch out for the position of the arguments, okay, and use that to pass your values in. So we can pass these values in. So we pass this value in. So this should be 70 here. So if we run this, that should still work for us. All right, perfect. That does work for us. All right, now that we are done with that, I guess that answers your question. Somebody asked, so is JavaScript used for backend? Yes, with Node.js. You can use JavaScript for backend with Node.js, but I don't do that. That is what I use C# for. So which other question? Once it gets to the structuring, you understand how to dispatch an action differently. So stay tuned, okay? Which other question? You pass your arguments based on how you are setting your parameters. Yes, that is correct. All right, so no more questions. So let's move ahead with functions. Now, the other thing we want to talk about functions is the return keyword. Now, when you're working with JavaScript functions, you see this thing we're always doing here. You are not always going to be doing console.log inside your functions. One common thing you will be doing mostly in your function is, returning it. So how do we use the return keyword in our function? Now, before we look at that, I want us to quickly look at what we refer to as global and local scoped variables in JavaScript. Global and local scoped variables in JavaScript. So let's clean up this code. I'll just delete this, clear up this, and let's just have this here. Okay. All right, perfect. This is what I want. Now, when you define a variable inside JavaScript, so if I come inside JavaScript now and I say const count, or instead of using const, let's use let. So let's say let count equals to 0. Okay, let count equals to 0. Now, if I try to console.log count here, I can say console.log, then go ahead and pass in count there. Now, if I go ahead and run this code now, let's call the function, let's call greet, that's the name of our function. Let's run this like this. Okay, perfect. You know what, let's comment out these sections. We don't want that to always run. So let's rerun this. You see, it says count is equals to 0. But watch what happens. Let me comment out this place here, or let's leave that. Now, let me try to print out count from outside the function. I want you to take note of this. Count was declared inside the function. Now, let me try to access it outside. How do I know I'm outside the function? If you look at the curly brace here, this is where it starts, this is where it ends. So outside the function now, let's try to access count. So outside the function, let's say console.log. So let's go ahead and call count outside the function. Watch what happens. Let's print this out. You see, we get an error. And if we read the error, it says count is not defined. It says count is not defined. But you might tell yourself, but we have count inside the function now. Now, this is basically because count in this case is what we refer to as a local variable. Now, what is a local variable? A local variable is a variable that you define inside a block scope or inside a code block. If you look at this here now, we have this curly bracelet here and the closing curly bracelet. This is a block scope here. So any variable you defined inside it is referred to as a local variable, and that variable is only accessible inside our code block. What that means is the variable is not accessible outside the code block. To easily explain this, in Nigeria right now, we have some of those resources that we have here, but other people don't have, like our crude oil. Okay, so those resources now are only available to us here, although some other countries have theirs. But in this regard now, the crude oil we have in this country now is only available to us and not people outside. Are we together? Now, if we define a variable in our global scope, what I mean by global scope is in our file here outside the code block. So if I, before the function, if I create a variable, let's say count, let's say let count, let's call this count global, let's give it that name and set it equal to, let's set it equals to 10. Okay, now if I try to print count global here now, okay, and we run this code, let's run this again. If I run this code, you see that we have access to it. We have access to count global. But watch this trick. If I try to print count global inside the function, let's print count global inside the function. You see that we still have access to it. We do not get an error. Do you see that? To be sure of what we are getting, let's concatenate it. So let's say count global from function. And here we'll say count global from outside. We need a T there, okay? Now, if I go ahead and run this, you see that from inside the function, it works. From outside the function, it works. This is because when you define a variable outside a function, okay, in the global scope, that variable is referred to as a global variable. Okay, that variable is referred to as a global variable. What that means is that the variable is available everywhere. If you look at the real life, let's take the air we breathe now. Everybody in the whole world breathes the same air. So we can say our air right now is a global variable because everybody breathes it. But then our crude oil that we have is only accessible to us. That then is a local variable. That's the same thing with these functions and outside this function. So when you have a variable outside the function, okay, that variable is referred to as a global variable and it's accessible anywhere in the code, either inside a function or outside a function. But if you have a variable inside a function, that variable is only accessible inside that function, which means if you try to access it outside the function, you can't get access to it. You can't access it. As you can see, if we do count from outside and we try to print out the count, that will give us an error. As you can see, we get an error that tells us, let's rerun that. You see, we get an error that says count is not defined. The error is telling us that, sorry, you do not define count. But we know we defined it, but it was inside the function we defined it. So keep note of that. We have local and global variables in JavaScript. Local variables are the variables inside a function. Global scope variables are variables that are declared in the global scope of your code. Okay? So that being said, let's talk about the return keyword now. Now, I already told you that once you have a function once you have a variable inside a function, it is a local variable. Now, is it possible to make this variable accessible outside the function? Well, the answer to that is yes. We can do that with a return keyword. So I can come in here now, and instead of, let's get rid of this console.log here, we don't need that anymore. Now, instead of console.logging count, I can decide to return count. So to return from a function, you just put the return keyword followed by whatever you want to return. Now you can return any data type, a string, integer, boolean, an array, an object. You can even return a function. Okay, so in this case now we are returning count. Now if I come here now and I call this, let's also get rid of this one, so we don't need this anymore. We don't need this. Let's leave the global. Now if I come outside and I call this function, you know what, let's rewrite this function. Instead of calling it greet, let's call it let's leave it as greet, but that means we have to pass a name to it. So let's pass Steve and 60 to it. Now, when you have a return keyword inside a function, you are basically telling the function to return that thing in front of the return keyword whenever the function is called. Think of this as the example I gave where the air we breathe is a global scope variable and our natural resources in Nigeria is a local scope variable. Do you know that Nigeria exports crude oil now? So we give to people that don't have, although they sell. Think of that as the return keyword. So since count is a local variable, we can still give it to people outside to have access to it. So outside this function, we can make count available. And to do that, we use the return keyword. So we basically say return count. And how do we get access to it outside? Well, I can come here now and I say, let value, I'm calling it value, equal to greet passing Steven and 60. Watch what happens when I console.log value. Okay, I'm doing that console.log there. Let's rerun this. Do you see we get 0? That is the 0 that is inside count. Let's change it to another number. Let's say 400. Run this. You see we get our 400. Which means now that by returning this count now, we have told the function that whenever you are being called, after doing everything, go ahead and return count. Which means we can store whatever count is returning now in a value outside the function, and we can use the value however we want to. Now, one thing you should take note of is that the return keyword, okay, that line where you have the return keyword should always be the last line in your function code. Look at this now. Let me move this return to the first line. JavaScript is already, do you notice the way it grayed out this line? Let's hover over it and see what it's saying. It says unreachable code detected. So JavaScript is basically saying, wow, this code you have here, I can't get there. That's because whenever a function gets to a line with the return keyword, it will not execute any code under it. That is why JavaScript is telling us that this line now is unreachable. So whenever you're going to have a return keyword in your code, make sure it's on the last line of your JavaScript file. Of course, unless you are using your if and else. That's why some cases where it doesn't have to be at the last line. But just have this at the back of your mind, that your return keyword should always be the last line at the bottom of your file. Else, any code you have under will not execute. JavaScript will not execute it. All right, that is for that. So if we go ahead and run this again, you see it still runs fine. Okay, that still runs fine. So that is that for the return keyword. That is that for the return keyword. Now that we are done with this, let's look at which other thing. We've looked at the return keyword. Now let's just have a recap to why we need functions in JavaScript. The recap is this: you can reuse the code in your function over and over again. So it's more like you write it once, you use it as many times as possible. Okay, so you can reuse the same code over and over again. Another thing is you can use the code as many times with different arguments. Like I said, when you are calling your function, you can pass in different arguments to it. Another thing we've learned about functions today is that your function can return values to the global scope by using the return keyword. And like I said, you can return any data type at all. You can return a string. So I can decide to return a string here. Let's call this hello. Let's just say hello here. If I run this, you see we get hello. So you can return a string. You can return a Boolean value. So I can say return true. It should be lowercase. See, we get true. You can return an object, but because we've not talked about objects, let's don't go there yet. All right. So you can return basically anything from your function. You can return anything from your function. And all you have to do when you are returning something from the function is when you are calling the function, you can store whatever you are returning in a variable and use the variable anyhow you want later. You can use that anyhow you want later. Let me see if there is any other thing we need to talk about before we talk about arrow functions. What am I missing in functions? Okay, let me see. Okay, let's look at the concept of using functions as variables sometimes. Okay, that's what we just did. That's what we just did. I don't want to talk about arrow functions until I'm sure we are done with everything about the basic functions. All right, good. We are done with every basic things we need about functions. So now let's talk about arrow functions. Let's talk about arrow functions. Now, sometimes in JavaScript, or more commonly, you will see that a lot of people when writing code, they use what we refer to as an arrow function. The first thing you should know about arrow functions is that they are always nameless. Okay, they are nameless. And the truth is, in JavaScript, you can actually write a function without a name. You see this function right here. Okay, you see that we are passing a name to it here, right? So when we want to declare the function, we say function greet. Then this greet here is the name of the function. If I go ahead and comment this, let's go ahead and do that. Let's comment that. Watch what another thing we can do in JavaScript. I can say let greet, okay, equal to function. Did you see what I'm doing now? Now, I'm not putting the name of the function after the function keyword. I'm actually creating a variable called greet, and I'm setting it to a function. You can actually do this too in JavaScript. And then inside here, let's do console.log. And let's log hello here. Now, if you remember what we discussed earlier, when you define a function, okay, when you define a function, okay, you have to call the function by its name for it to execute. But if you look at this function now, we did not really give it a name here. Well, this variable here is actually acting as the name. You see this function we've declared here is what people refer to as a nameless function, or what we call an anonymous function, a function without a name. But because we are storing it in a variable, whenever we want to call this function, we can actually call the name of the variable greet like this. And watch what happens when we execute this code. It still runs. Okay, so this is what people refer to as a nameless function. Now, in JavaScript, when you're writing nameless function, there is a sweeter way of writing it. It's more, it has a better, would I say better? It has a more eye-pleasing syntax. Okay, instead of this, you will see people will do something like let's call this say hello, okay, equal to, then you will see something like this as a function. So in here, let's do console.log say hello. Now, if I come here now to execute this, you still also call the name say hello. And if I run this now, you see that this should still work. So you see that hello works and say hello works. Now, keep this at the back of your mind, that this thing and this thing are the same thing. It's just this one here that we have here is what people refer to as an arrow function. And why do we call it an arrow function? Well, basically because you see this arrow here, this is where the name comes from. This opening bracket is still this bracket you will see. The opening and closing bracket up here, this is it here. And then you have an arrow before the code block, which is this one. So this is what we refer to as an arrow function. An arrow function is still a nameless function. Okay? An arrow function is still a nameless function. Okay, somebody asked the question, I think I did not see that. Okay, she said, is let a JavaScript syntax or just var? Okay, somebody already replied and said the let keyword is used to declare variables in JavaScript. The var keyword can also be used to declare variables, but the key difference between them lies in the scope. var is a function scope. Var is function scope, while let is block scope. That's actually correct. See, in fact, it's not really advisable these days you use var. That was why I did not bring it up. Okay, it's not advisable. It's not recommended you still use var. A lot of people just use let and const these days. That's why I did not bring it up. But she was right there. Okay, the explanation she gave there is totally on point. Okay. All right. So if you look at this function, like I was saying, this nameless function and this arrow function we wrote here, it's still the same thing. One thing you should note about them is they both don't have name. So they are both nameless function. And that is why an arrow function is still a nameless function, but with a sweeter syntax. Okay, people just prefer writing it like this as opposed to writing it like this. It is still the same thing. So this is what we refer to as an arrow function. Now you might ask, okay, well, how do you pass parameters to an arrow function? Well, you do it inside this open brackets and close brackets here. So if I want to pass in a parameter here, I can say pass in a name, and then we'll say hello plus the name. Okay, so we say hello plus the name, and then you can also do the same thing here. You can say pass in a name here too, and we'll say hello plus the name here too. Of course, when you are now calling the function, it means you have to pass in the name here. So let's pass in Steven, oops, a P there, and let's pass in James here. So if we run this now, you see that hello Steven runs through, and say hello James walks through. So what to keep in mind here is that arrow functions are nameless functions too, which means they don't have a name. Okay, they don't have a name. The name that is used for them is the name of the variable that is storing them. So in this case, say hello is the name of the variable that is holding the arrow function. So when you need to invoke it, you use the name of that variable. The same thing with a nameless function. A nameless function does not have a name. So the name of the variable holding it is what you pass in as the name of that function. All right, so that is that. Let me see the questions people have. Does the arrow function and the nameless function work the same as other functions in terms of parameter and arguments? Yes, they work the same. You can see that here. They do exactly the same thing. They work the same way. It's just people feel, since this is more sweeter, you know, it shows a lot of advanced developers or more experienced developers do this. Okay, they just throw in the arrow function there. And when you are doing React or when you are doing a front-end framework, you would see the arrow functions being used more. People just use it more because it's sweeter. Now, one thing you should note about the arrow function, one thing that makes it a bit different from this other function is that you see this arrow function right now that we have here. Did you notice we only have one piece of code inside it? Good. When you have an arrow function that have one piece of code, you don't really have to provide a code block. Let me show you an example of that. Let's write an arrow function to add up two numbers. So we'll call it let add numbers equal to, then we want to write our arrow function. This function is expecting two numbers, num1 and num2. So what this wants to do is add the two of them together. Now if I do this and I say console.log num1 plus num2. Now let's comment this out. I don't want to call the greet. Let's also comment this. No, let's leave them. So I can call add numbers and pass in two numbers, 10 and 30. Of course, if we run this, we should be expecting 40 like we get. But like I said, since this arrow function has only one line of code, you don't really need to provide a code block for it. So you see this block of code you are seeing here, we don't really need it. I can take this line and just put it immediately after the arrow. I can do something like this, and watch, it still works. Do you see that? So what I'm trying to say here is this: if your arrow function is going to have just one line of code, you don't need to provide a body, that is this open and close curly bracelet. You don't have to pass it, and that's because by default this arrow function works like a return function, works like a return keyword. So it will basically return anything in front of it. So you would sometimes see this a lot, and that is where you will see somebody, they will write a function, it will just be one line, and that's what we have just done. Look at this function now, it's occupying just one line. Instead of providing a body that will look something like this, okay, we just did everything in one line. So when you are using the arrow function, and you are just going to have one line of code, you don't have to provide a body for it. But you can't do that for these other functions. You must always provide a body for it. All right, so somebody has a question. So we can use both interchangeably, or are there events where we are not supposed to use one over the other? And then somebody says, so you still need to call it before it can run. Yes, you still need to call an arrow function before it can run. Although there is a way of calling any function to automatically run. Okay, but what we are dealing with right now, okay, is a function that you need to execute before it runs. Okay, so when you store a function, be it an arrow function or a nameless function in a variable, you need to still call it before it can run. Somebody says, so can we use both interchangeably, or there are events when we are not supposed to use one over the other? Well, the answer to that is this: depending on your code or what you are doing at a particular time. Now, I don't think I've ever encountered any scenario where I could not use both. Okay, but sometimes this is programming, and I don't know if that scenario is out there. So I'm not going to say no to that or yes to that. But what I know so far is that most places where you can use your arrow functions, you can still use your nameless function. Okay, you can still do that. Or you can still use your normal old-fashioned way of writing a function. You can still do that. Okay, so there might be scenarios where your arrow function might be the only thing that will work, or your nameless function or the regular function is the only thing that will work. The only thing I can point out to you is this: if your arrow function is going to have a single line, or if your function is going to have a single line, you might not need to stress yourself providing a body for it. In that case, an arrow function might help you out. Like this code now, you see it, we have it in just one line, and it's working fine. So somebody says, does it mean that if it is only one line of code, you can keep it on one line? Yes. If your arrow function is just going to have one line of code inside the body, like this one we have here now, you see, though we provided a body for it, but if you look at this, it's only having just one line of code. In this case now, I can decide to get rid of this here and just move this to one line. This is a lot more cleaner. It occupies less more space. Okay, so I can do that in that scenario. But if you still provide a body for it, nobody is penalizing you for it. Okay, so that is still allowed. Any other question on that before we move ahead? Okay, if you have a question, because of time, please just write it in the comment section. Okay, we'll see after.
I actually asked the question, you didn't answer.
Okay, let me search for that. Okay, please kindly do same sample on JavaScript HTML script version. See, all the code we are writing here will work if you are using HTML. Okay, all the code we are writing here would work. All you need to do, look at my folder structure. I have an index.html and I have my app.js. All you need to do is, in your body tag, link to your JavaScript file. To do that, just open the script tag. Just open the script tag and close it. Then provide a source attribute. And inside the source attribute, what you want to do inside the source attribute is provide the link to this app.js. Now, because my app.js and my index.html are in the same file, you can simply just say app.js. And if you save this now and you open it in the browser like we have here, if I refresh, you'll see that it's still working. So all of the JavaScript code we have been writing since will work fine in your browser. I am just not using that approach because I don't want to be going back and forth, opening browser, coming to VS Code, going back to browser. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Somebody is already preferring the arrow function though. It is simple and easy to use, no problem. And somebody already agreed. Like I said, a lot of people find it to be more simpler, to be cleaner. Okay? People find it to be simpler and cleaner. Although there is a time it can hold you. Okay, like there are sometimes for example, when you are dealing with this keyword, but I don't want us to go into that today. Hopefully, if I have another free time this month, or maybe the first week of next month, we might have another class again. We'll be dealing with OOP in JavaScript, object-oriented programming. So we'll have more time to talk about this keyword. But because if you're using regular function, you will not have issues with the this keyword. But if you are using arrow function, you will have issues with it. But like I said, we are not going to be going into that today. Else, we will have spent time doing other things. But like I said, personally too, I agree with, is it Elena or Ellen and Cynthia? I prefer this more. Okay, it's more sweeter. It makes you feel like, yes, you are a badass coder. But it's good, it's cleaner, it's neater, you write way less more code. Most especially if you are just going to have one line of code there, okay, you can have that. Of course, like I said, when you're using the arrow function, and the good thing about arrow function when you are using it is, when you have a single line of code in the arrow function, you don't have to use the return keyword. Look at this example. I don't have to say return again for this line. This arrow here is already acting as return. So I can come here and just store this in a variable. Let's call this var result and set it equal to add number 10 and 30. You know, the only time we were able to do this earlier was because we were using the return keyword here. If you remember, it was because we are using the return keyword. But when you are working with the arrow function, you don't have to specify the return keyword if you just have one line of code. Okay, so you don't have to specify the return keyword here. So by this now, we can come down and console.log results. And if we come here, you see that it still works fine. Let me drag this up. You see that we still get our 40. So we don't have to come here and say return. You don't need, in fact, you see VS Code is not happy. It says, no. Let's overwrite it and say what it's saying. He said, you don't need that. You don't need that. Emmanuel says, arrow function is awesome until you fall into callback hell. And yeah, that's almost the same thing as I said. When you are dealing with the this keyword and you are using arrow function, you'll see shaggy. But like I said, that is why we have this different approach. One thing you should know about programming these days is we have different approach to dealing with things. So a lot of times, this different approach would now, the situation you find yourself will now determine which approach you run to. Personally too, I like the arrow function. But when you are dealing with the this keyword or callback hell, I quickly run back to the former way of writing functions. Okay, arrow functions are always sweet until it's no longer sweet. they are just like chewing gum. When you buy it and you start chewing it, it's still sweet. But when you chew it more than like 20-30 minutes and all the sweetness is gone, it just be like say you can't exercise your mouth. All right. So that is that on arrow functions. And we'd actually stop there. So we'll look at another topic. If you've got questions, like I said, feel free to ask them. So we want to look at objects. Okay, so what is an object? I think this is where this note stopped when I was taking it. This was where I stopped the notes. Maybe I'll finish it after the class though. So what is an object? JavaScript objects are containers for named value, for named comma values called properties. For named values called properties. Let's see what that basically means. So let me go ahead and comment out all of this code. And then let's talk about objects. To easily break this down for you, so you understand what objects are. Okay? In JavaScript, sometimes when you want to describe some things or you want to store values or record about some things, creating a simple variable might not get it done for you. Before now, what we are used to doing is we can say let norm equals to 10. This is what we are used to doing. Or we say let name equals to James. This is what we are used to doing. But sometimes are the comments used to tag? I don't really get. Yes, Ellen, we can explain that, but if I start that today, we might not be able to have time to continue with the other topics. What I can do is this. Let's see if we can finish all of the topics that we listed. If we are done with this, I can go back to the this keyword and explain it. But the thing is, for us to fully understand the this keyword, we really need to understand more about objects and OOP in JavaScript. And OOP is not part of our class today. That's why I just pushed it aside. But don't worry, hopefully after this week, maybe the first week of next month, I can fix another class where we would have a class to talk more on it. Although Emmanuel just dropped the notes on the this keyword, so you can read that a bit there, but I would work out time for us to talk more on it. If we have time today, we'll talk on it, okay? All right, let's come back to objects. So in JavaScript, sometimes when we are declaring variables, we are used to doing something like this. So we say norm equals to 10, name equals to James. But the thing is, sometimes we might want to store more than one record about a particular thing that a simple variable name value like this might not describe. What I mean is this. Let's say we want to describe a car now. Okay, in the real life, a car is an object, right? A car. Why? Because we can see it, it has a shape and it's visible to us. Now, if you look at a car in the real life, okay, a car has some properties. Like a car will have a color now. It will have a height. A car will have, what else does a car have? A car will have maybe numbers of tires. So we can say numbers of tires or wheels. A car will have numbers of doors. A car will have, let me say, it will have the year the car was made. It will have the model. It will have the manufacturer, and so on and so forth. A car would also have an engine type. You get it? Now, all these things can be used to describe a car. But if you go further into this, there is something about cars you will notice again. Okay? You discover that a car can move. Okay, a car can move. Another thing about cars is that they probably have a speed limit. Okay? A car can also stop. This right now is a real life object. This car that we are dealing with right now It's a real life object. So we already say that this car has what we refer to as properties. And it also has what we refer to as actions. So what are the properties? The properties are the physical features of the car. So a car has a color, has a height, has a speed, has a year, has a model, the year it was manufactured. It has the manufacturer's name. A car, on the other hand, has actions. The actions are the things the car can do. Okay, like this car now can move, it can speed, it can stop moving. These are the actions of the car. But the major thing about these cars is that if we want to represent a car in our JavaScript code, how do we do that? Because if I come to JavaScript now and I say let car equal to, I can just say let car equals to Ford. This does not really describe the car, because like we said, a car has a lot of properties. So do we want to say let car name or car manufacturer, or let's say let car model equal to Ford? Then we'll create another variable, let car color equal to black. And then we say again let car which other common, let car year equal to 2003. How many variables do we want to create to hold all of these properties? You will probably create as many as 20. Then how do you also store the actions? Of course, the actions could be method or functions, but do we also want to create variables to store all this? So it can get quite overwhelming when you are dealing with things like this. It can get really quite overwhelming. So what can we use in JavaScript to store all of this record belonging to a car? Well, that is where object comes in. Okay, an object in JavaScript can have properties and it can also have methods. So the properties are the characteristics of that object, and the methods are the actions of that object. So let's try to represent this car now, okay, with objects in JavaScript. So all we need to do is create a variable called car, then set it equal to, we open parent curly bracelets. Okay. Then we open curly bracelets there. Are we together? We open curly bracelets there. Now, inside this curly bracelet, we can then go ahead, okay, and specify the different properties and actions belonging to this car. So inside the curly bracelet now, I can say color, then set the color. Let's say color here will be black. Put a comma. The next one, height. Let's don't worry about height, because when we say height of a car, it can be a bit unnecessary. Let's go with things that are more common. Year and model. So we can say year, set it equal to 2003 like we said, comma, model. We can set this equal to, I don't really know common models of this thing, but let's just set it equals to, give me a model of a common car. We can say Camry, right? Anybody give me okay, Toyota Corolla, Tesla, and so on and so forth. Perfect. Sometimes these things just run off your head. Let's say Corolla. Then the next thing will be maybe the brand. In this case, which is the manufacturer. We can say this is from Toyota. Okay, Nissan Altima. Okay, nice. Let's go with Toyota here. Now, you can see that by just defining one variable, I've been able to successfully put all the properties of this object of a car in the variable. Now, let's go with the action. Don't forget, I said in JavaScript, the actions refer to the methods. So how do we write the actions? So I can come here and say move and set it equal to a method, which in this case is a function. Okay, the method in this case is the function. So I can say move, then you give it a nameless function. Okay, don't forget we talked about nameless function. So we can give it a nameless function, and here we'll just simply say console.log the car is moving. Okay, the car is moving. Now, if I come down here now, let's move this comment up here. If I come down here now, you would agree with me that doing this is a bit more simple than creating different variables to hold all of this. Now, you might now ask the question, okay, well, how do you assess each of these properties, and how do you even assess this method? Well, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is call the name of the object, in this case car, and use a dot operator. You see, the moment I say car dot, did you notice all the properties that are popping up? We have color, we have model, we have brand, we have move, we have year. So I can say, let's do console.log and pass in color. No, not just color, we have to do car dot. You use the dot operator to access the property. So we'll say car dot color. Let's run this and see what we get. Do you see? It says black. What happens again if I come again? I say console.log and I do car dot brand. Run this again. It says Toyota. So you see that we can access all of these properties using the dot operator. So all you need to do is call the name of the car, of the object, use the dot operator to access the properties. The same way we can use it to access the methods inside of it. So I can say console.log, then I will do car.move. So call the function there. Don't forget this is a function. If I run this now, it says undefined. Did I say dot move? Okay, that's supposed to be a function. Why is that undefined? Let me see. That is a function. Let's see why this is throwing. Okay. Why is that giving us that error? Let's see this. Undefined, car.move. What am I doing wrong here?
It's working.
But I'm getting undefined. It's not working for me.
No, it's working. Maybe the undefined is coming from somewhere else. You can see.
Oh, car is moving.
The car is moving.
Jeez, sometimes this rubbish happens. So where is this undefined coming from? Console.log, the car is moving. Where is that undefined coming from? Let me see. Do I have any code up that is not working? Where is undefined coming from? Let me end this terminal and rerun it. Sometimes your code can crazily misbehave. Still the same thing. Let's check our browser and see if we get that undefined too. We're getting it. There has to be a reason for that. It
says on line 49. Let's see.
Do I have a line 49? Yeah, it's saying this line. This. Yes, it's logging. Oh, I think I know what is happening. My bad. I'm console.logging it. I should not console.log again because we're already logging in here. That was my mistake. So you just have to say car.move. It was doing undefined because this was not returning anything. So we were trying to console.log whatever this was returning, and we are not returning anything. That was why. So this should work now. You see that? So we are not getting that undefined. But if we are returning something, if I put a return here and let's return yes, let's just return yes there. Then I can do console.log, okay, and throw that in there. Now you see that it will log that yes instead of undefined. So that was the mistake. I was console.logging it. I should just call it there. All right. So that was why we're getting that error. So all in all, I guess you understand the whole concept of this object. Now, sometimes when you're writing your JavaScript code, okay, you might need to store real life objects in your code. For example, we just created a car and we wrote all of the properties and the methods that we know here. Let's say, for example, we are building an e-commerce platform and we want to store the details of our products. Of course, you will know that every product on an e-commerce platform would probably have a title, it will have a name, it will have a description, it will have the images, it will have a price. That kind of thing now, it makes sense to create each product as an object. Okay, to create it as an object, and inside the object we have the properties of the product and the actions that can be performed on that product there. Okay, so that is where objects can really come in handy in JavaScript. That is where objects can really come in handy. If you've got a question, please go ahead and throw your questions before I continue. Any question on that, please write it on the comment section and we can read it. Let me see what is here. We can store all the properties of the car using an object. Exactly. So you get the idea. So all of these properties, we are storing it in an object. You know what? Let's take another example. Give me another real life object you know. Anybody, write it in the comment section. Write it in the comment section. Any property you know. Constructor functions. No, we will not be using that today. That's more of when we want to talk about OOP. That's more of when we want to talk about OOP. That's when we talk about constructor functions or even constructor. They actually refer to as more as classes, but we'll not be going into it today. And that's why today this time we have might not really give us enough time to cover virtually everything. And I don't know next week if I'll have an off day. Let me see next week. I think I will be free on Friday next week too. Let's see what we can do. Please, I was thrown out. I did not get anything on object. Frayo, we might not be able to go back on objects today, but the class is being recorded. So after the class, you can actually go back and work on it. Then somebody says we'll be working on another example. Okay, perfect. Yes, when we work on another example, you can pick up what you did not catch up on. Okay, let's look at another real life object that we know. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Somebody gave us an example of students. Perfect. Somebody gave us an example of students. So let's say in our code, we want to store record belonging to a particular student. Okay, we want to store record belonging to a particular student. So how do we do this? Of course, I told you that when you are dealing with a real life object, you can't be creating different variables to store record about that object. Now, let's first of all ask ourselves this question. What are the common things that are common to a student? In this case, let's talk about the properties first. What are those things you know are common to a student? Of course, a student will have a name. A student will have an age. Which other thing? Let's see. A student might have a grade. Okay, those are some common things that will be common to a student. What are the actions that can be common to a student? Let's talk about the actions. A student should be able to, we should be able to mark a student's record. Okay, so that's one common action. Now, let's represent this with JavaScript. I can come down and create a variable called student, set it equal to open curly bracelets. Now, inside this curly bracelet, I can create properties. To create a property, just give it a name, colon, the value. That's why if you look at the definition of properties, I told you they are stored in name value pair. So this is the name of the property. This is the value. So for this student, let's say the name will be John Doe. And the property in this case, we can say age will be, let's say the age equals to 25. And which other thing about the student? Let's say the grade, like we said here, the grade. Let's say this student scored 70. That is all for the properties. Now, what of the action? Let's say we want to mark a student record, okay? Or more better, we want to return the grade of the student. So if the student has a grade of above 70, we want to say the student has an A. So let's have mark as a function. So we'll set this as a function, and we'll write an if statement in here. So I can say if grade, okay, is equal to or greater than, no, it should be greater than or equal to 70, we want to return, let's return A. Else, okay, let's just return F here, okay? So if the student scores 70 and above, we are returning A, else we return F. Or I think we call it F9 more. We majorly call this F9 more. So we just say F9 there. Of course, if you are doing a proper grading system, you know you have to account for B, C, D, E before F. But we don't have time to be writing a lot of code to do that. Now, this right here is a student object. To access each of these property of the student, all you need to do is call the name of the object, do a dot operator, okay, and then you see you get access to all of this, okay? You get access to all of this. I think I missed something up here. I think the name here we use doesn't really flow well. This up here should be more of mark, and this function should be grade. So this should be a grade function. Let's fix it up here. It should be grade, and this should be mark. So it makes more sense that 70 is the mark and grade is the function, okay? Although the naming convention don't really matter, okay? So you can use any of the naming conventions you have. Somebody says add a major as an object also inside to match at Allen. Major, what do you mean? The grade was supposed to be the class or level of the student. No, we can have a level property for that. Okay, we can have a level property for that. So we can set level equals to, let's say, 100 level. Okay, we can set level equals to 100. Why I'm saying that is that grade sounds more of a function, sounds more like an action, okay, to grade the student. Like I said, this naming convention doesn't really matter, okay? This naming convention doesn't really matter, okay? You can name it whatever you want as long as you understand the concept. You can declare properties and you can declare function. That's the main selling point here, okay? So to access all of these properties, you can simply say student.name. This will give you the name of the student. If I say student.age, this will give you the age of the student. And if I say student.grade, this will go ahead and execute the grade function for us here. Okay, that will go ahead and execute the grade function for us there. So let's do this. Let's console.log student.name. If I go ahead and execute this, we get an error. It says grade is not defined. What does it mean grade is not defined? This is grade here.
Should be mark or something. Yeah, mark, not grade again.
It's grade. I saved that as grade.
Grade is just a function and we are calling it again. We are testing the function. It's supposed to be if mark is greater than.
Oh, that's true. If mark, thank you. The code inside there was wrong. It was when I renamed it that we did that. So let's rerun that. We still have an error. Let's see what the error is saying. Mark is not defined. This is mark up here. Why are you saying not defined? Mark. Let's see this. Okay, I think we have to now talk about the this keyword now. I was trying to avoid this, but I think we're stuck with having to talk about it. All right, for those of you who wanted to talk about the this keyword, we're actually stuck now. Now, let's talk about the this keyword a bit because we're stuck with it here. Now, the this keyword, when you are dealing with objects in JavaScript, okay, is referring to the particular object you are talking about at a particular point. Somebody says, I knew you were going to talk it. I was just waiting. I guess so. I was trying to hope we don't have to go too deep into talking about it. So you caught me there. So let's talk about the this keyword a bit. Now, when you create an object in JavaScript, inside that object, when you use the this keyword is referring to the object itself. So when we are inside a function in an object, we really don't have access to all of the properties of that object. To get access to it, we have to use the this keyword. I repeat again, this is just talking to the object. So by doing this, is the same thing as saying student.mark. But instead of saying student.mark, we refer to it as this.mark. Again, this is still talking about the student. Okay? So whenever you are inside a function in an object, to get access to the properties of that object, you use the this keyword. This is where this is coming from here. So you see that if I don't use the this keyword, okay, and I try to run this, it gives me an error. Let's see that again. Let's do this. It gives me an error. Do you see where the error comes in? It's telling me that mark is not defined. And that's because truly inside this function, we don't have a variable called mark. But once I use the this keyword, okay, and I run this now, you see that it works fine. Now, this is a very bad place to use arrow functions. Because when you use the this keyword inside the arrow function, it will not refer to the object again. Let's see that in action. So instead of using the regular function, let's try to use arrow functions. Okay, let's see that in action. Let's end this. Do a Ctrl J. Throw in this. Does that still work? Does that still work? Let's see. But that still works. It's not giving us an error yet. That means it's only in callback hell that we will have errors doing this. Let me see this. Let's see this.
Arrow function by default says this keyword.
Yes. When you are using it inside an object, they can actually access the object. That means the only place we have to worry about arrow functions is in callback hell. Please, arrow functions are cool, Jerry. Let's leave it like that. The only place we have issues with them is when we have callback hell. All right? So you can still use your arrow functions here if you want to. You can still use your arrow functions here. But I'll stick with the normal functions. So the this keyword is very important in this case here. So let me quickly explain the this keyword again. The this keyword inside an object, okay, is basically referring to the object at that point in time. So if we say this dot mark, we are basically saying this student dot the mark of the student. That is what we refer to when we use the this keyword here. Okay? Again, you can't access the properties of an object inside a function in that object directly. We will get undefined in JavaScript. If we run this, we'll get undefined. So to actually access it, we need to use the this keyword. So you have to say this. Again, the this keyword is referring to the object itself. Okay, the this keyword is referring to the object itself. So when we say this dot mark, we are referring to the student that is the object. So this dot mark returns us this. So if we want to access age too inside a function, we have to say this dot age. If we want to access level, we have to say this dot level. If we want to access name, we have to say this dot name. All right, we have to say that. So if we console.log this, console.log student.grade, if we run this now, it should give us A because the grade was 70. So we should get A. You see, if we turn the grade to anything lower than that, let's put 30, we should get F9 there. You see, we get our F9 here. So that's basically a short intro to the this keyword. Although when we are dealing with classes, if we were to do OOP, we will be able to expand more on the this keyword there. But for now, this is just more than enough we need for this. So any questions on objects again, anybody, or if you feel you have a way to explain it or a contribution, please go ahead and do that. Can we use multiple objects inside another object? Perfect questions. Yes, you can have an object inside an object. Okay, you can have an object inside an object. For example, let's talk about a student. Okay, now we know that a student can take more than one course at a time, right? So if I come here, I can say course or subject. Let's call it subject. Let's call this subject. A student now can offer a subject that can be complex. For example, now, if a student is offering a subject like, let's say, chemistry, we can still break chemistry down. Chemistry now as a subject can be an object. So we can come here and say subject, then give the subject a name. Did you see that? So we can give the name as chemistry. That is the name of the subject. What other property can a subject have? What other property can a subject have? A subject can have a score, okay, a test score. Let's say this subject will have, let's just call it score, okay? This subject will have a score of a total of 100. Do you see that? And so on and so forth. Now, how do we access the name of this subject now? Watch this. Watch what I am doing right now. We have an object called student, and inside this object we have some properties, and the value of some of the properties are just strings, the value of some are numbers, the value of some is a function, but the value of this subject, if you look at it, is another object. So basically we have an object inside an object. Now, if we are to access the name of this object, how do we do it? It's basically simple. We have to say student dot, what is the key? What is the property that we want to access? Subject. So I'll say student dot subject. Okay. Then what is the property of that object we want to access? If you look at this now, you can see that subject is an object on its own. So if we want to go into it, we have to say dot name. We won't have to say what? Dot name. So in this case now, I can come here and say subject dot name. Of course, you know we are referring to this name inside the subject object here. So if I run this now, you see we get chemistry, which is this here. So to answer your question, yes, we can have an object inside another object. If I want to access the score, I can come here and say subject dot score. If I run this, you see it works fine. Now let me see which other question somebody says. Can we also initialize an object? The answer to that is yes, but then we'll be talking about OOP, which I don't really want us to talk about today. Emmanuel already answered that. He said yes, we can initialize an object. Example, creating an object by using the new keyword is called initialization. So we can say car equals
instantiate, not initialize, sorry.
Instantiate. Okay, can we instantiate an object? You cannot create an instance of an object because it's not a class. You can only create an instance of a class. Now, Emmanuel is saying creating an object, okay, create an object by using the new keyword. Car, CA equals to new car. This creates an instance of the car class. Exactly, we are not dealing with classes here. So because of that, I don't want to really go into that. I promise you guys, next week Friday, we'll have a class where we'll talk about OOP in JavaScript. And we'll talk about classes, instantiating, and so on and so forth. But for today, we are not dealing with that, okay? I don't want us to draw back and start talking about another thing when we actually prepared a course outline for today, okay? Now, if you've got any question or contribution, please go ahead and throw it. I want to listen. I'm all open. Meaning we cannot instantiate an object. Yes, the concept of it instantiating, it's like creating an object of a class. So you can't instantiate an object itself because it's not a class. Okay, you can't come here and say, let student equal to new student, or you can't even say let student equals to student. Okay, you can't do this. Okay, that's because student in this case is a class. I mean, it's an object and not a class. When we get to next week class, we'll talk about classes and how to create an instance of it. Okay, but for this case, we are dealing with objects. Now, JavaScript is the only language that I know that you can create an object without creating a class. But I don't want us to go deep into it. In other programming languages like Python, C#, Java, in order to create an object, you need to create a class and then you instantiate the class. Okay? Please, sir, do we get to go on break? Or the class is all through? We will be going on break immediately after we are done with this discussion. We'll be taking a 20 minutes break. We already talked about that earlier. Friday said no time. Please, we have to make our time. I don't want to talk for too long. I want to give myself a little bit of breathing space, okay? Talking for too long usually impacts me later. That's why we'll be taking a short break. 20 minutes is not really long. I want to take a break first, try to eat something before coming back. Okay? Somebody says we need to stretch our legs and drink water, please. Exactly. Let me stretch my leg and drink water. Okay? All right. So that is that on objects. Again, when do you use oh, you said okay to Ellen. What about okay to me? Mr. Frayo, how far? I'm so with the wrong package now. I complained more than she complained, and you said okay to her. Emmanuel, a break is necessary. Leave us alone. All right. So to quickly go through what an object is. Again. Or when you need to use objects in your code. Sometimes you might want to store records or data pertaining to a real life object. And one thing we've learned about real life objects is they are a bit complex. For example, when you say student, in the real life, a student has a lot of characteristics or properties, or sometimes we refer to them as attributes. Okay? We refer to them as attributes. So sometimes when you want to store real life objects in your JavaScript code, you use objects to store them. An object in JavaScript can have properties or attributes, and it can have methods. The properties are the characteristics of the object, and the method are the actions. That is, what can the object do? In the real life now, if you are taking a car as an object, a car can move, it can stop, it can speed. Those are some of the actions of a car. So when you want to represent a car in your JavaScript code, as you have seen, like we did before, all those actions we implemented them as methods or functions in our object. Okay, so that is basically what an object is. And again, we pointed out that when you want to access a property of an object inside a function of that object, you have to use the this keyword. The this keyword is referring to the object itself. In this case, the student object itself. Okay, that is what the this keyword is referring to. Now, we're going to take a short break, 20 minutes, which means I expect us back by, let me see, 12, by 12:10. Let's come back by 12:10. If you've got a question, you can prepare it during the short break and throw it back to us, okay? We'll be back by 12:10. So everyone, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue. Prepare your questions, please, because that will show me that you are following along with the class. Thank you. Hi everyone, let's start coming together. Let's start coming together. It's already 12:10, so let's start coming back. Let's start coming back. If you can hear me, please just either wave your hand or say something. Okay, Shegun is with us. Okay, good. More people are with us. Cynthia, what's up? Are you with us? Mr. Friday, Trinity, are you with us? Mike and Co. You can hear me? All right, good. I guess virtually. What about Lillian? Are you with us? Aziz, what's up? Are you with us? Adora and Adebanjo, hope you guys are with us. All right, perfect. So our break is officially over. We've tried 20 minutes. It looks way too short for me though. It's not enough for me to finish eating. Okay, let's move next to arrays. Now, I won't be spending way too much time on arrays, and I won't be spending way too much on arrays, but we would just do most of the common things or the basics and cover some methods in arrays. Is Mr. Paul with us? What happened, Mr. Paul? Mr. Paul, where is he? Maybe he left. All right, whichever way, he will meet us or watch the recording. All right. Where is this person? Lillian, you're with us, right? Oh yeah, she's with us. Okay. You did wave your hand. What of this? What's her name? How do we access the second object we create inside our function? Is Alien with us, or how does she pronounce that name? Or she has gone on break and decided to take way more longer break. Mr. Friday, you said how do we access the second object? It's the same thing. You use a dot operator. Look at this. This is it that we did here. Okay? Console.log. Look at this. Student.subject. Don't forget that the second object here, okay, the second object here is still just a property of the student object. So you do student.subject That's what we have here, student.subject. And the subject is the second object you are referring to. Okay, Ellen is back with us, and Itino is back with us. So student.subject.name, that's how we access it here. Okay. All right, let's come back to talk about arrays. We have a lot to cover, so I might be a bit pretty fast because we still have a long way to go. We have more to cover than we have covered. All right, let me go ahead and continue this now. Okay, so let's talk about arrays in JavaScript. So what are arrays? Well, basically, an array is the data structure like an object. So in fact, under the hood in JavaScript, an array is an object. Okay, so sometimes you might want to keep a collection of items or a collection of something and store it in one variable. Let's say we want to create a variable called fruit, right? If I come here and create a variable and say let fruit equal to apple. Now, if I want to store more fruits, of course, I have the option of saying fruit 1 equals to apple, and then fruit 2 equal to maybe mango. Then again, we go with fruit 3 equals to that. We keep going. But if you look at this now, we are creating new variables to hold each fruit. New variables to hold each fruit. And this can be quite overwhelming if we want to come back and start calling these fruits. We have to keep track of 3 different variables. We can solve this problem using an array. Now, we can come here and I can say let fruits equal to declare an array in JavaScript, just like objects, you use square brackets, not just like, objects use curly bracelets. Arrays use square brackets. So I can say square brackets, and then I pass in all the fruits, all of them separated by commas. Okay, all of them separated by commas. You see that? We passed all of these fruits, all separated by commas. Now, you might ask, how do we now access each of these fruits in the array? How do we do that? Well, it's simple. One thing you need to know about an array is every item inside an array has a position. So every item inside an array has a position. The position of apple is 0. So apple is occupying a position of 0. Somebody is trying to join. So apple is occupying a position of 0. Mango, on the other hand, is occupying a position of 1. And carrot is occupying a position of 2. Now, this thing we are doing here is what we refer to as the index of these items. So, as we said, apple has an index position of 0. Mango has an index position of 1. And carrot has an index position of 2. Yes. Now, because of this indexing that we have here, whenever we want to print out an item from this array, we have to pass in the index position. Because if we just come here and we say console.log fruits. Okay, if I just come here and I do console.log fruits, if I open this, let's Ctrl J. If we run this like this, hello guys, are you still with me? All right, I think I got disconnected for a while there. Sorry about that. Now, if I open this, if I print this like this now, you see what we get in the console. I get apple, mango, carrot, just the whole array. Now, what if I want to print out just apple? All I need to do is put a square bracket after the name of the variable. In this case, the name of the variable is fruits. So immediately after fruit, I put the name of this bracket there. And then the name of this bracket in this case now, not the name of the bracket, the name of the variable. Then you open square bracket and close it. in between these square brackets now, you put the index position. So yeah, if I want to print mango, I just say 1. If I run this now, you see I get my mango printed out. If I want to print carrot, I just say 2. If I run this now, you see I get my carrot printed out. Now, using this approach, you can see that it becomes easy than creating separate variable for each of these fruits. Now, when you're working with arrays, we have some inbuilt methods or properties that you can use to work with an array. The first one is we have a way of getting the number of items in the array. If you want to count how many items you have in this array now, there's a function for that. So we have one, we can say console.log. All you need to do is call the name of the array, fruits, then do a dot length. We have a length property for this. Okay, if I run this, you see it tells us 3. I know some of us might be shocked. Since we said the positioning starts from 0, how come we are getting 3? Please keep this at the back of your mind. The positioning of the items in an array is different from the total numbers of items in that array. The positioning is talking about where the items are located. How do we locate it? That's what the index is talking about, the positioning. But the total items is talking about how many items do we have in the array. And when counting, we start from 1 there. So we can say 1, 2, 3. So in this case, that is why we are getting 3. But when you talk about the positioning, it's like where exactly is an item located in an array. Positioning starts from 0. So that's why the index of apple is 0, mango is 1, carrot is 2. Now, there's a trick to this. Sometimes you might know the length of the array, but you don't know the position of the last item. For example, if I tell you now to print out the position of the last item in this array, of course, you can come here and say fruit square brackets 2 because you can see it. So if I tell you to print out carrot, you just put 2 here. That's because you can count. It's just 1, 0, 1, 2. But what happens when you have a very long array, like a really long one, that you can't even count? I've worked with an array that returned over 1 million plus record. If they tell me to print out the last item in that array, do you think I'll go and count 1, 2, 3? No, 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 1 million plus? No, there is a trick to doing it. If I want to print out the last item in this array, okay, the last item in this array, all I have to do is this. I know that array.length will give me the length of the array, right? But there is something fishy here. If you look at this, the length of this array is saying 3. But the index of carrots that we want to print is what? 2. Did you notice a difference between 2 and 3? What's the difference between 2 and 3? 1. That is to tell you that the length of an array, okay? Let me write that out for you. Let me open our chat section so I can catch any chats coming. Okay? That is to tell you that the length of an array is always always 1 greater than the highest index. Did you catch what I am saying here? I said the length of an array is always 1 greater than the highest index. What is the length of this array? According to JavaScript, is 3. What is the highest index? 2. So that's to tell us that the length of an array would always be 1 greater. If we add one more item to this array, in this case, let's add one other common fruit. Let's go with pear. Cucumber. All right. Okay, should be you. All right. This item we just added now, if we ask for the length of this array now, it becomes 4. Do you get that? Now, what is the index position of cucumber here? If we are to continue, that will make cucumber to be what? 3. What is the difference between 3 and 4? 1. You see that this statement here is true, that the length of an array is always 1 greater than the highest index. Now, if we know this is true, okay, if we know this is true, when we have the length of an array, it becomes easy for us to find the highest index. Now, if I ask you this question, you have an array of 50 record. What is the highest index of the item in that array? Who can answer that?
49.
49. How did you calculate 49? Just minus 1 from the total length. That will give you the highest index. It's as simple as that. Of course, that should also tell you that the highest index of an array, is always 1 less than the length of the array. So the highest index of an array is always 1 number less than the highest index, than the length of the array. So if I tell you an array has a length of, the highest index of an array is 10, what do you think would be the length of the items in that array? Who can help us out?
11.
Exactly, you just had
11.
1. So when you know the length and you are looking for the highest index, minus 1. When you know the highest index, you're looking for the length, add 1. It's as simple as that. So that is that for the length and the index of an array. Now, after declaring an array, can you add a new item to the array? The answer there is yes. Look at this. Let me try to reduce this a bit so that we have more space to write code. So look at this array we have here: apple, mango, carrot, cucumber. To add a new item to this array, you just say fruits dot append. Is that append? No, push. Sorry, append is from Python. I can do fruits dot push, and then let me push a new fruit. I just say pear or pen apple. Okay, pineapple. If I go ahead now, console.log the fruits. If we run this, you see that the new array we get, pineapple becomes part of it. So when you do push, it will actually add an item, okay, to the end of the array. In JavaScript, how many of you have heard of the concept of queue and stack? Not just in JavaScript, I think in programming generally. We have what we call queue and a stack. Or for those of us that did computer science, I'm sure you've heard of the concept of LIFO and FIFO. If you've not, LIFO stands for last in, first out. And you can basically see this in a stack. FIFO on the other part, let me arrange this well. Let me move to the next line so we don't confuse them. So if in a queue, we have what we call a FIFO, which means first in, last out. And then in a stack, we have LIFO, last in, first out. Let me give you a typical example of this. If you go to the ATM and there's a queue in the ATM, remember I just said queue, so that should tell you I'm talking about a queue now. And there's a queue in the ATM. Since you are the last person to get there, where do you stand? You stand at the back. And because you are the last person to get there, you become the last person to leave too. So that is a typical example of a queue. And it follows the principle of FIFO. Okay? First, no, I think I made first in, first out, not last. first in, first out. So in a queue now, the first person that comes there is the first person that leaves. So if they say, okay, everybody come line up and write down your name, that is a queue. The first person that gets there is the first person that writes their his or her name and will be the first person to leave the queue. Another example is when you're buying fuel in the first station. You're in your car, you just drive to a fuel station. If you are the first to get there, you become the first to leave. If you are the last to get there, you become the last to leave. That is why in a queue, sometimes they can also refer to it as LIFO, which means, who can guess what this one means now? Last in, last out. On the other hand, we have what we call a stack, which means last in, first out. When you're washing plates, okay, maybe you're washing broken plates now that you put them on top of each other. Have you noticed that the first plate you wash is always the last you rinse? How is that possible? You wash a plate, you put it down. You wash another one, you now put it on top of the former one. You wash again, you put it on top of it. You wash again, you put it on top of it. You continue creating a stack on it. When you are done and you want to start rinsing the place, where do you start from? Go and start from the bottom and break everything. Yeah, I trust my mommy. You'll collect better slippers for back. So you when you stack them up from top to bottom, you start removing them from under. You don't start like that. You start from the top. So that means the last plate you washed now becomes the first one you rinse and take away. So in that instance now, you're following what we call a LIFO, last in, first out. Or sometimes they can call it PILO, which also means first in, last out. So in programming, a lot of our data structures sometimes follow these concepts of queue and stack. Like in JavaScript now, do you see that when we push an item into this array, because it's the last item coming, it was pushed to the front, to the last position, which is after cucumber. Of course, when you get to the bank and you see a queue, you have to line up at the very back, so you become the last person there. That is what we just did. Okay, that is what we just did. Now, with that being said, let's look at some of the inbuilt methods we have when we are working with arrays in JavaScript. Now, we have a lot of methods, and we might not really have time to cover every one of them, but we'll cover the few that we can. If you call an array and you do a dot, you'll see a lot of things might pop up, but of course it's not popping up. But if I do splice, okay, if I do array dot splice and I open this bracket like this, okay, now what the splice method does in an array, should we talk about splice first? Let me see if there is something else we can talk about first before splice. I want us to take them one after the other. Should we do splice first? Let me see. Let me see. No, let's talk with the join first. We'll talk about splice later. Let's start with the join. Now, when you call the join method in an array, okay, when you call the join method in an array, it basically joins everything in the array together. Look at this instance. Let's comment this out and do console.log fruits.join. Let's print this and see what we get. Wow, I get an error there. Oh, dot, not command log. Dot log. I did command log. Perfect. Do you see that this goes ahead and creates a string of all the items in the array and separated them all with a comma? Okay, separated them all with a comma. Now you can change this thing that is using to separate them. Instead of a comma, if you want to change it to something else, you can pass what you want here. For example, I want it to use a dot. If I run this now, you see apple.mango.carrot.cucumber. You can change this to basically anything you want. I can do a star. And you see, star now, this time around. We also have another method, the toString method. When you call an array and you do toString, it basically creates or converts the array to a string. So we can say .toString. Let's comment this out. If I run this now, you see that it still returns the toString method. Although some of you might say, but this one looks like the join method. Well, although it looks like that, but you can't change the separator in this case now. So that is the toString. Now, let's look at popping and pushing. I know we have talked about push before, but let's look at popping. What happens when you do array.pop? Watch this. If I say fruits.pop, okay, and then I console.log fruits. Let's see what happens. If I run this, did you notice something is missing? Let's go to our fruits. Look at all the fruits we have. Apple, mango, carrot, cucumber. But look at what we get at the end of the day. So something is out of it. When you do pop, you basically remove the last item of the array. Okay? So whenever you do pop, you are getting rid of the last item in that array. That is what pop does. Okay? So when you do array.pop, you are getting, like, taking out the last item in the array. Now, sometimes you might want to pop an item from an array and still collect the item. In this case now, because this pop returns the item it takes out, so I can store it in the result. I can say let removed item equal to fruits.pop. Watch this now. I can console.log removed item. If I run this, you see that it told me that, hey bro, I removed cucumber. Did you see it? So you can actually get whatever was popped from the array. Now, still talking about array, I know we've talked about pushing to an array. So pop takes something out of the array. Push adds something to it. So let's do fruits.push. This time, let's push cherry. Okay? If I save that and I run this, you see that cherry has been added to this array now. So that's what push does. Okay, that's what push does. Let's look at another common method that you might use in an array, and that is the shift method. So I can say array.shift. Now, what the shift does is, the shift works like popping. But instead of popping, you know, when you do array.pop, it gets rid of the last item in the array. But when you do array.shift, it actually gets rid of the first one. So we can say it is the opposite of pop. Pop will get rid of the first item in the array. Shift will get rid of the pop will get rid of the last item. Shift will get rid of the first item. So if we do array.shift and we run this now, you should notice that apple is gone. Why? Because we said array.shift. Okay, because we said array.shift. Now, there is another one we called onShift. There's another one we called onShift. Oh, lowercase shift. So we call this onShift. Now, onShift works like push. Okay, onShift works like push. It's just that when you do onShift, it actually, you know, when you do push, it adds an item to the first position, to the last position, right? When you do onShift, it adds an item to the first position. So let's say onShift, let's just say me there. I've run out of names of fruits. What does it say? It said,
There's you before your shift.
eh? Thank
There's
you.
you.
All right, thanks for that. I already got an error. Do you see that me was added before mango? Okay, so that's what shift and onShift does. That is what shift and onShift does. Now, can you change an item that is already in an array? The answer to that is yes. Let's see that in action. So basically, I want to try to change mango to maybe cherry. Can I do that? Yes. All you need to do is find out the index position of the item you want to change. In this case, mango. So I can come here and I'll say fruits dot, what's the index? No, not dot. Open bracket, open square bracket, 1. Then I'll set it to cherry. If I save this, run this, you see that mango was changed to cherry. So it's possible, okay, it's possible to change an item in an array using this option. Now let's look at 2 more methods before we move away from arrays. Let's look at 2 more methods. We want to quickly look at splice and slicing an array. So we want to look at how to splice an array. Now, the splice method actually allows us to add a new item to an array. But unlike shift and unshift or push and pop, when you are using the slice method, you can actually state the index position you want the new item to occupy. Okay, let's see that in action. So I can say fruits dot splice, then I specify the index position I want the new item to occupy. In this case, let me say after carrots. Okay, no, before carrots, which is index position 2, I want to add a new item. So I'll just put 2 there, comma, okay, 2, comma, I don't like that pop-up. I wanted to show you guys something. Okay, if it's not coming up, let's let it go. So 2 dot comma, then I want to put, let's say, any other fruits. Let's still use cherry. I've run out of fruits. So if we run this, oops, what happened? Slice. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I don't want it to remove any item. Okay, I think I messed this up. Let me try this. Let me see if this will work. I missed something up there. So index position 1 item. So cherry, carrot. So we are supposed to have apple, mango, carrots, cucumber. Okay, so the splice, what am I doing wrong? Oh, I think I messed it up. So when you're using the splice method, okay, when you're using the splice method, you can use it to add a new item to the array. But when you're adding items to the array, okay, you need to specify, okay, where the new item should be added, okay, where the new item should be added. That is what this first parameter here says. So I'm saying insert it at index position 1. What is the item at index position 1? Mango, okay. So I'm saying insert it at index position 1. The second parameter, okay, is talking about, do I want to remove an item? If I say remove one item, it means I want to remove. But since I don't want to remove, I'll pass in 0. And this is why you need to be very careful when you are using the splice method. The splice method can be used to add an item to an array. It can still be used to remove an item from an array. That is what this second parameter is saying. Do I want to remove? I have said no, that is why I'm saying remove 0 item. Then the third parameter is the new item you want to add. So now we should get the behavior we expect. Perfect. So we get apple, cherry, mango, carrot, and cucumber. If I change this one to 1 now, it means I want to remove one item. So how does it remove the item? Well, it just looks at this. Okay, this is the index position 0. This is, let's go to the top. This is index position 0. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. Now, we are telling it to remove one item after that index position. So basically, it means it would remove mango from us, from there, and insert cherry in its place. Let's see that. Do you see that mango is gone and cherry is there now? So be careful when you are using the splice method. It can remove and add an item to an array. All right, you can use it to do both. Okay, you can use it to do both. If you just want to remove an item, you don't need to pass in. Let's say I just want to remove an item. I can say fruits dot splice, then I'll just pass in the index position. In this case, let me say I want to remove, let's move this code down here. Let's say I want to remove mango, index position 1. I'll just pass in 1, 1. The first one means remove the item at this index position. The second one means how many items do I want to remove. Okay, so if I go ahead and run this now, mango should be gone from this array. You see, we don't have mango anymore. What we have now is apple, carrot, and cucumber. That is the splice. Now let's look at the last array method, which in this case is slice. Okay, which in this case is slice. Now the slice method, okay, is used to slice out a part of an array into a new array. So if you want to slice out a part of an array into a new array, you can use the slice method. Let's see this in action. So I can say fruit dot slice, okay, and then I will specify how many items it should slice. Let me just say 1. Now let's store this variable inside a new array. Let's call this new array. New array equals to fruit dot slice. Now let's print out new array and let's see what new array is. Do you see that new array creates a new array for us? Now whatever we did here did not affect the old array, because if we come here and we still say fruits console.log fruits and we save this, you will notice that the old array is still complete. Now what this new array, this slice method does is, starting from the index position you specified, it will create a new array from the other item there. So we have told it index position 1, which is mango. If you look at our array, index position 1 is mango. So when you use the slice, it will create a new array with the remaining elements starting from the index position you specified. That was why now we have mango, carrot, cucumber. Because if you look at index position 1, what you have is mango, carrot, and cucumber. So that's basically what the slice method does. That is what the slice method does. Now, I actually forgot some other functions. That means we'll spend time with arrays a bit. We'll spend time with arrays a bit. Now, there are some common functions in array that you use mostly in your React Vue.js project. And those are functions like filter or map. Okay, let's look at filter and map. Now, how does filter works? Let's say you want to loop through your array, and for every item in that array, you want to filter, create a new array based on a condition. For example, let me say I want to create a new array from all of this array. Okay, if a particular item in this array contains O, you see this string now, there's O in the name there. This one, there's O in the name there. So I want to loop through this array. Anytime I meet an item that has the letter O in it, I want to use it to create a new array. That is where this filter method can work. So let's see it in action. I can say fruits dot filter. Now the filter method takes in a function. This function is the function that will run for every item in that array. So what I can do is, now there are actually two basic parameters we mostly use when we are using the filter method. The first thing is the item at a time. Okay, I would explain this more, but let me write this code out first. So I'll say function and we'll have this. Now basically the filter method will run like a loop. Okay, so it will run for every item in this array, And for every item in that array, it will run this function we have here. So if I ask you a question now that how many times do you think this function will run? What should be your answer? Well, go and count how many items are in the array. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 items in that array. What that means now is when we run the filter method, okay, this function here will run 4 times. So it will run every time for each item. So see that in action. Now, using this filter method, now I can say filter for every item in this array, run this function. So the function will check if, okay, if item dot contains, I want to see if it contains, if item dot contains the letter O, okay, there's something wrong here. Oh, I think I am missing this up. The filter method shouldn't really take a function. We can just give it a callback function like an arrow method. Okay, I think an arrow method is what we expect here. An arrow function. Yeah, this should work. Just let's see it in action first, and I'll quickly explain how it works. So let's say let result equals to this. So let's go ahead and print results. Let's go ahead and print results. Let's run this. We get an error. What's item is not
spelling filter very well.
Oh, thank you for that. Filter, thank you for that. We get an error. It says item is not defined. For each item is defined. You're supposed to loop through each and every one. Let me see. It's been a while I used this, but this should run. Okay, let's say item, comma, followed by the function. We don't need this here. That's why item was not defined. It actually takes a function directly. Inside the function is where we have item. Exactly, yeah. There was an issue with my code there. Dot contains, S is there. You see, sometimes you make some of these silly mistakes. This should work fine. Oops, what is it saying? Item dot contains is not, include. So sorry about that. JavaScript uses includes. It's C# and I think Python that uses contains. That's what happens when you write so many programming language. You mix their methods together. So in JavaScript, it's actually include, not contain. Okay. Now, if you don't know how this include work, includes is like what this is basically saying is for each item we have in this array, okay, any of them that includes the letter O. But I think that should be contains, but I'm not the writer of JavaScript. They are using include, so let's leave it like that. So for each item in this array, if it includes the letter O, use it to create a new function. Okay, add it to the new array. Now, the filter method, this is how it works. When you use the filter method on an array, it basically creates a new array, but the only items that will be included in that new array are the items that match the condition you put here. Are we together? So it will be the item that match the condition you put here. In other words, any item that includes the letter O in its name will be added. You know what? Let's put a more easy function. Let's say we are looking for any item that matches carrots. So we can say it should include it if item is equal to carrot. So which means the only item that should be included in the new array are the item that contains that it's equal to carrot. Let's run this now. And you see only carrot was chosen in the new array. How do I know it's a new array? Look at, it's a square bracket around it. Let's also look for items that are equal to mango. Okay, let's see this in action. I'll just put mango there. If we run this, you see that we get mango too. That is just perfect there. Now, let's try to use this on an object. You know, we talked about object earlier. So let's see it in a real life. Now, to get this working, let's create an object of products. Okay, so let's create two objects actually. So we'll say let product 1 equal to a new object. Each product will have a name. So let's say this one is iPhone 7. Then it will have a price too. The price of iPhone 7, I think they used to sell it 25,000. Don't argue with me.
Yeah.
What did you say? All right, what other thing is common about app listing? Can the function search more than one item? Can it search for more than one item? Yes, it depends on the condition you pass to it. So, you know what, let's just go with these two properties. This is a load. I mean, this is okay. Now, I know earlier when we were talking about objects, I told you an object will have properties and methods, right? Well, in JavaScript, it's not a must that your object must have methods. Look at this object I just wrote now. This is still a valid object. It doesn't have method. Nothing is wrong with that. So let's have product 1 and product 2. Product 2. Product 2 will be Samsung 7S. I don't know if a version like that exists, but I don't care. Let's say 75,000 naira. Let's create another product. Let's create another product. In this case, we'll say product 3, set it equals to Infinix people. Give me one version of Infinix. Let's set the name equals to Infinix Hot. Hot 10.
Note 5.
Note 5. Okay, let's go with Note 5. Infinix Note 5. Now, let's also give it a price. So we'll come here and we'll say price equals to, let's do 80,000 naira. Okay, I think I'm getting an error. Is this an error? Could not find name. Oh, we'll say let. Okay, so we have 3 products now, not equal to semicolon. We have 3 products now. Now let's create an array of products. So let's say let products equal to, now we want to add all these our products inside this array. So I'll just come here, I'll say product 1 comma product 2 comma product 3. Okay, so we added these 3 products inside this array now. Now what I just did is to prove to you guys that an array can hold any data type at all. So, you know, earlier when we created an array, look at it up here. Where's that our array? Up here. We are just storing strings inside of the array, right? Well, an array can hold a string. It can hold numbers. It can hold objects. In fact, arrays can hold arrays. We call it nested arrays. So inside an array, you can have another array. You remember earlier when we created an object, we discovered that an object can hold another object too. So in arrays, arrays can hold arrays too. So if we look at this now, if we look at this, we have 3 products, and inside the 3 products we have added all of them to an array called products. Now, this time I want to loop through the array. I want to create, let's say for example, I tell you, find all the products, okay? Give me all the products that have their price less than 50,000 naira. If you look at these products we have now, the only product that has its price less than 50,000 naira is iPhone 7. Of course, we know in real life that one is a big lie. But let's just flow with it. Right? So, if I ask you to create an array of the products that have their price equals to 50,000 naira, using the filter method, we can do this. All we need to do is, let's say, let new products equal to products dot filter, then we pass it a function. The job of the function is to check for each of these products we have, which of them match the condition. And what is our condition? That the price is less than 50,000 naira. So I'll simply, now you should pass a function here. The function will take, so we'll just say item, and we'll say item dot, no, instead of using this function, let's use an arrow function. I hate using this inside the filter method. So let's use an arrow function. We'll say item returns item dot price is greater than, no, less than, is less than 50,000 naira. If we save this now and print out the product, let's see the product that we'll get. Oops, we get an error. The same product, I'm spelling filter wrong again. Oh God, my teachers, you have to return my school fees. So ordinary filter, I can't spell. Do you see this? The product we get back is what? iPhone 7. So the way the filter method, my screen is no longer moving. I think it's your network. For the other students or for the other people listening to me, if you can see my cursor and my screen moving, wave your hand, please.
It's the same thing. You can't see, like, it's hanging.
It's hanging. Wow, I'm so sorry about that. Any other person will be experiencing the same thing.
Yes, but I just kept on going out, coming in, going out, coming in.
So it's from my end, yeah.
It's from your
I think so.
Oh, I think it's my network. So sorry about that. But can you see it now?
Yes, I can, because I left and I came back.
Okay. Can you see my cursor moving around?
Yes.
All right, perfect. It means we're on track now. So, as I was saying, the way the arrow function works, the filter function works is it creates a new array from the existing array based on the condition you pass to it. Okay, so that's what you can use the filter method to do. Actually, let me show you a typical example of where this can be useful. If we go to Google now, okay, let's go to Google. You know, when you're on Google, so let's go to, I don't use Google as my default search engine. So I have to, if I go to google.com, perfect, I'm on Google now. You know, when you're on Google and you're searching for something, let me search for Java. Did you notice these drop downs that are showing? Can you guys see this drop down that are showing?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Now, sometimes when you are developing an application, you might want to give your users this kind of experience. Let's say we have a list, all right? Let's say we have a list of courses we offer in our school. And then we want to give users the option to be able to search for a course, okay? Let's say in our school we offer chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, Yoruba, art, social studies, and so on and so forth. Then we want to provide the user a search box like this for them to be able to search. Okay. Now we might want to say immediately they start searching for C, we want to display all the courses that start with C. Are we together on that part? Hello, guys.
Yes.
Good. We want to display all the courses that start with C. So how do we use a filter method to achieve this? It is simple. All we need to do using the filter method now is we'll just simply do, let's say we have a variable called courses. Let's come back to our code. Let's say we have a variable called courses, or instead of using courses, let's use products that we already have. Let's say we want our users to be able to search for a product based on the name of the product. So whenever they start typing, we want to filter the products that include the alphabet they are typing. So the moment they start typing IP, we know that they are searching for iPhone related product. So we can run a filter method and we'll say, let me show you a version of a filter method that can work for it. So if you are running a filter method, all we need to do is come here. Let's run a version of the filter method and see that in action. Just a moment. My wireless mouse battery is down. I don't remember the last time I charged it. Let me switch to another one, please. Let me switch to a different mouse. Where is that? All right, perfect. So if we want to do this now, let me comment out this line. We can say something like, let result equal to products dot filter, then open bracket. We are supposed to pass a function. In this case, we are using an arrow function. Then we will say the item. Then it should return us for us the item that includes. Then we'll pass in what we want to include. So in this case, let's say we want to search for items that has I in their name. We'll just say item that includes I. If we go ahead here now and print the results, oops, we get an error. It says includes item dot name. We are searching with the name, guys. Sorry about that. We are searching with the name. Don't forget that each of our item is an object. So it's the name we want. So we'll just say item dot name dot includes I. If we go ahead and run this, you see that it gives us Infinix Note 5. But I think there is an iPhone also contain I. Okay, it's case sensitive. This is capital I and this is small I. Well, we can change it to lowercase before checking. So we can do dot to lower 1W there, not 2. So if we run this now, we get an error. Is it just lower instead of to lower? Sometimes I mix this up. Or is it lowercase? This function, sometimes I mix all of them up. An error. What am I missing wrong here? To lowercase. All right, it's to lowercase. You can see that the result we get now contains those items alone that has I in their name. That is how useful filter can be for us. Okay, now that is that on filter. Let's look at its brother, map. Let's see how map works too. Basically, map works like filter, but this time it doesn't filter results based. It doesn't do the same thing filter does. Fine, map will look through the array also. But what map does, okay, thank you guys for saying it's dot to lower. You can't really, the problem with me is I code using a lot of programming languages. So sometimes I'm making mistake of, I know in C# is to lower. In Python, it is just lower. So sometimes I miss all of them up. But by the time I try 1, 2, 3 times, it will work. All right. So when you are using map, it works like filter in the sense that it loops through the array. But you want to only use map when you want to edit or you want to change something. For example, now, let's say all the prices of this products we have, we want to add 1,000 naira to them. So price, this is 25,000, this is 75,000, and this is 80,000. We want to add 1,000 to all of them. We can use map for that. So let's see how map can do that. We can say let result equal to products dot map. And then when you are mapping, This one now will give you it also takes a function. So we have the item, and all we want to do is we'll do product, it should be arrow function. We'll say item dot price plus 1,000 naira. Let's go ahead and print result and see what we get. Did you see? Did you see the new result we get? Did you notice? Okay, is it 1,000? It's 100 we added. It should be 1,000 naira. Okay, let's go ahead and rerun this. Did you see this now? So we have 26,000, 76,000, 81,000, which we actually did here. Okay, but when you're doing this, sometimes what you might want to do is give it a body, so it makes a bit more sense this way. So if we run this now, what happened? It said undefined. Oh, we have to return. So we'll say return. Oh, that's why the arrow function works. That's why the arrow function works. So instead of that, we can just stick with the arrow function. See why arrow functions are fun? They help us reduce our code and get rid of all of this rubbish. So all in all, what you can see now is we get a new array with the updated value that we want. Okay, that is what map can do for us. If you've got a question, please go ahead and ask your question before we move ahead. Or you've got a contribution, go ahead and do that. Anybody? Am I disconnected? Seems my network is a bit bad. Hello guys, can you hear me? Just wave your hand or say something if you can hear me.
Yeah, can hear you.
Good. MTN network is crazy this morning. It's annoying. All right, thanks. Okay. So if you've got a question, go ahead and ask. If not, we can just continue. Let me just do a recap of what filter does. You want to use the filter when you want to create an array of the existing array, but only select those items that match a particular condition. That is when filter can work. Okay? On the other part, when you want to use map, it is when you want to iterate to the current array and maybe change something in the array. So you want to map through all the products and change their price. Map can do that for you. Okay? Map can do that for you. So one thing to note about map is that map will create a new array. Okay? It will create a new array, and it does not execute the function for empty elements. So if you have an empty element in the array, let's say this array now, you have an undefined or empty element, it will run for those. Okay? And it does not change the existing array. So the fact that you are mapping, if you come here and still do console.log products, and if we run this, you will notice that the existing array, they still exist with their old figures. So instead of 26, this one is still 25. Instead of 76, this is still 75. Instead of 81, this is still 80. So the old array will keep its initial value, but the new array will be updated. The same thing happens when you are using filter. Okay? The same thing happens when you are using filter. Filter keeps the old array the same way it is and just create a clone of the old array based on the condition you pass to it. Okay, based on the condition you passed to it. Now, there are a lot of other methods we might have to look at, but because of time, okay, because of time, we might not really have time to look at all of them. Might not really have time to look at all of them. So if you've got a question or contribution, are we going to look at loop? We might not, but we will actually definitely look at how to loop through an array. Okay, because we have the for loop there. So we'll quickly look at that before we move to the next topic. Oh God, these topics are lots. I knew one day would not be enough for us to cover it. I was just trying to see if it will. Because if you look at our course outline now, we've not talked about destructuring, template literal, and ternary operators. You know what we will do? Since I already promised you guys that Upper Friday we'll have another class, I would have said on Monday, but Monday is my birthday and I'm not coding that day. Nothing will make me write any code that day. So what we will do is this. Is it Monday, Seth? Let me see. Is it Monday that is 24th? Let me see. Which day is 24th? Just a moment. I don't forget my birthday again. Debbie, which day is 24th?
Yeah, correct.
Monday, right? It should be Monday. I feel no sabi things, but that my birthday, I know they forget them. All right, so what we'll do is this. Monday I will be free, but it's not like you like code pass anything.
Monday evening after the parties.
No. See, that Monday I'm going on a break. As I'm speaking to you right now, I'm not even feeling too good, but I already promised you guys about the class. So what we'll do is this. I promise you guys this. Upper Friday, okay, I even said Upper Friday we'll still talk about OOP in JavaScript. So what we'll do is this, so that we get the best of today's class. Let's spend the remaining time we have talking about arrays. In fact, let's spend it more on array. I want us to build a project on arrays. Okay, let's build a project on array and see how it can be fun to build a project. Somebody is saying, let's assume we have different products. We want to increase the price of each product with different amounts. Are we going to write map for each product? Now, in that case, you might need to write a more complex code. Now, typically, when you want to use the for loop, the map method, okay, when you want to use the map method, it's basically, I mostly use it when I want to do the same thing to all arrays, to all items in the array. But if you want to, for example, like you are trying to ask now, if you want to increase the price of each item in the array by different amounts, I would advise you do it individually. Okay, in fact, I don't think no e-commerce would ever do that. They increase their price by a specific amount. Of course, you can do it, but in that case, you might be better off using the normal for loop. Yes, the class is being recorded. The recording will be made available approximately 2 hours after this class. So 2 hours after this class, you will have access to the material. So to answer your question, Joseph, you can do that, but I don't think any code or any company would want you to do that. That is, you loop through an array, increase them by different amounts. The best approach would be you do it individually. So you get the product by its ID, you increase the price by whatever you want to increase it by, you get the next product and you do that. Okay, that would be the best approach for that. All right, so like I said, we are going to spend today looking at arrays and array method. We'll also look at destructuring. If we don't have enough time anymore, we'll move these last 3 topics to our next class, which is on Friday, this same time Friday, but it might not be up to 5 hours. It might be 10 to just 12 straight. Okay, so let's still talk about for loops. Somebody said, are we going to talk about loop? Yes, we will, although we might not spend too much time on it, but we have to talk about it. So that is that for arrays. Now let's quickly look at loops. Okay, basically I'm going to be focusing on for loop and while loop, although this was not part of our course outline. So I'll go through it in like 10 minutes. We should be done with it. So what is the for loop and while loop? Well, in JavaScript, basically when you hear the concept of loop, it means an event that occurs over and over and over and over again. So as a human being, take for example, if you go to the children playground, when children are playing on swing, you notice that when you push once, it continues going up, back and forth. Just like for those of us who did physics in school, a simple pendulum. You push it once, it goes back and forth, back and forth. That is a loop. Maybe you are at home, you are thinking, you were coding and yes, there is a bug. You don't know how to fix it. You start walking up and down your room. That is a loop. So in code, sometimes, okay, you might want to execute a particular piece of code over and over and over again. Okay, now how do you do that? Well, you use loop. So basically what I mean is this. Let me say I want to write console.log hi. Now this hi, I want to print it 20 times. I have two options. I can either do console.log, copy and paste it 20 times, which will be unnecessary because you can use loop. So to use loop to do this, using the for loop, we can say for. Now, since we want to run it 20 times, let's declare a variable. Okay, in the for, you have to declare a variable first to state the number of times you want it to run. So I'll say for let start equals to 0, which means the number it should start from. No, I want to start from 1. So we are going to run 1 to 20. So we want to print this 20 times. So we'll say let start equals to 1. Then end that. We'll say start less than or equal to 20. Now, this is a condition. Okay, like I told you, a loop is an event that will keep happening over and over again. So by saying start less than or equals to 20, we are putting a condition when it should stop. So that means if this starts from 1 and it start looping, it will run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When it gets to 19, 19 is less than 20. When it gets to 20, 20 is equals to 20, so it will run. But when it gets to 21, 21 is not, oh, that's greater than, this should be less. 21 is not less than 20, is not equals to 20, so it will stop running. You know what? Let's write this and I'll quickly explain how it works for you. So start less than or equals to 20, then we'll do start plus plus. Now, let's move this console.log hi here. And because of time, I don't want to get to 20. Let's stop at 5. Now, let's run this program and see what we get. If I run this, did you see how many times hi was printed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, I'll quickly go over how this ran, and then we'll move to while loop. How this ran was this. The very first time JavaScript got to this line, okay, fine, created a variable called start, save 1, initialized it to 1. The next thing we are telling JavaScript is, why, if start is less than or equal to 5, run this code. Now, we are starting from 1. I want somebody to answer this question for me. Is start less than or equals to 5? Anybody?
Yes, it's equal to 5.
It's less than 5.
It's less than 5.
Because start is starting from 1. 1 is less than 5. Then JavaScript will execute this line. It will print hi. Once it is done, it will come to this section. So this is how it runs. Run this one. Run this one. Run the statement inside the code block. Come here. So once it come here, it will increase start by 1. That is what plus plus mean. Another way you can do this, you can say start equals to start plus 1 if you like writing too much. But you can just do start plus plus. So what this line will do is it will add 1 to start. If you remember, what's our former value of start? Start was equals to 1, right? Exactly. So 1 plus 1 will become 2. It will come back to this line again now. Is start less than or equals to 5? Is 2 less than or equals to 5? The answer to that is yes. It will come in console.log again. That's why we get the second line. It comes here again. It doesn't bother coming here. It only does this for the first time. It comes here again. Start plus plus, which means 2 plus 1, making 3. Is 3 less than or equals to 5? The answer is yes. It runs this again. That is how we got this. Then he adds 1 again to 3. It becomes 4. Is 4 less than or equals to 5? The answer is yes. Comes down, prints this again. That is why we get the fourth one. Adds 1 again, making 5. Is 5 less than or equals to 5? The answer is yes. It prints this one, which is how we got the last one. It got ahead and had 1 again. It becomes 6. Is 6 less than or equals to 5? The answer is no. 6 is greater than 5. The loop will stop. Is that understand? Do we understand the flow like that?
Yes, perfectly.
All right, very good. So that is how the for loop runs. Now, when you are increasing this place, you are doing plus plus. You can increase it anyhow you want. If you know when you do plus plus, it will be adding 1. It's the same thing as saying start equals to start plus 1. You can decide to increase it by 2, increase it by 3. So I can do start equals to start plus 2, which means it will be increasing 2 every time. Which means the first time it will run will be 1. The next time will be 3 because he added 2. The next one will be 5 because he added 2. You can also increase it by 3. You can increase it by 5. Anything you feel like, depending on how you want it to execute. Now that is the for loop. We also have the while loop. Okay, let's still write the same piece of code, but this time using the while loop. Now for the while loop, the syntax is different. This is how the while loop works. So you say while, put the condition and the body here. In this case, we want this to be the body of our code. Okay, now we'll start. So we'll declare the variable let's start here. So we'll say let's start equals to 0. And the same condition, while start is less than or equal to 5. Okay, and then we do. Now some of you might be wondering, why do we have this start plus plus when we are using the for loop? Well, the reason we have it there is because we want to avoid having an infinite loop. If you remember when I was explaining how this for loop runs, it is this line that is increasing the value of start, right? Now, without this section of this code, start will forever be 1. And 1 will forever be less than or equal to 5. And what that means is we enter into an infinite loop. Our loop will never stop running. Now, in the case of a while loop, we don't have a way of declaring the step here. So what we mostly do is, on the last line of the while loop, we increment start ourselves. So we say start. You can do start plus plus or still do start equals to start plus 1, whichever way you do it. If we run this, it should run this very same way for us. Do you see this? Oh, we should start from 1. If you start from 0, it will go 3 times. So it will go 6 times. Start from 1. Look at this. This still runs the same way as for loop, but it takes a different flow. First time it starts, start is set to 1. It will now ask, is 1 less than or equal to 5? The answer is yes. Console.log high, it gets this here. Add 1 to start, start becomes 2. Is 2 less than or equals to 5? Yes. Console.log high. So it does that until it gets to 5, which will print all of this. And when 1 is added to 5, is 6 less than or equals to 5? The answer is no, so it will stop executing the while loop. Do we catch that? Wow, that was great. And I actually explained it in 10 minutes, like I said. So that is it. Do you have any question on that before we move on? Anybody? Okay, no question on that. Perfect. Please, for those of you who are joining us from other groups, okay, there's a community that we have. Most of the people here on this class are actually from the community. That's the Tech Leap Africa community. I'll paste the link to it on the chat section. You can join us. It's free to join. We are not collecting money. Free to join, free to learn. You can ask them there. Most of my classes there that I do for them are always free. Awoof. But these Awoof know the wrong belly. So you can join us if you want to. That's the link to it. Also, I have a YouTube channel where I paste most of the recording of these classes. Okay, so if you are interested in that, I'll paste the link to the channel. You can go ahead and subscribe and join. Okay, you can go ahead and subscribe and join us there. And that is loading. Just a minute. I'll share the link to that. A topic under what we're doing, but generally in software development, if we are going to be in 20, sorry. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so where is the link to that? I should get a link to share that. My channel. Okay, good. So I'll be able to. Everybody, how you doing? In this video, we're going to be looking at building. All right, so that I've just pasted the link to the channel on the chat section. Oh, you see, is now Emmanuel joined, Abby. Is now he finished his own break. So we just took. All right, so I just pasted the link to the YouTube page there. So please do this. Join us on the Tech Leap community, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's where most of the classes we have here, where I'll be pasting the video. When you are done subscribing, make sure you turn on the notification icon. That is when you will be notified when I drop the video. All right. So that is that on loops. If you've got a question, please ask. If not, let's move ahead. Please, no questions. Thank you, no questions. Sorry about that. It's because I'm trying to run with time. But you can ask your question on the group, okay? If you've got a question, ask it on the group. All right. What are we? Okay. Now, we've talked about loops and we've talked about arrays. In JavaScript, okay, sometimes you might want to loop through an array. You know, your array is a collection of items, right? You might want to loop through every item in your array. Now, instead of using the for loop or the while loop, we have an inbuilt method used to loop through an array, and that's called the for each method. Watch this. I can say product dot for each. Okay, product dot for each. No, I don't want that. Don't autocomplete it for me. Product dot for each, and then for each item, I want to run this code. So for each item, oops, not like that. We should have item here. So for each item, we want to run this code. Let's say, for example, we want to print out the name of the item. I can say console.log item.name. If we run this now, oops, we get an error. It's pointing to for each. Is it capital E? I think it should be that. Perfect. It's capital E there. So you see we have iPhone 7, Samsung, Infinix. What the for each method does is it loops through the array, and for each item it finds in that array, okay, for each item it finds in that array, it does something. Can you go over the JS break statement? If you want to talk about the break statement, the break statement is only majorly used inside the select is it select switch? Sorry, we basically use the break statement more inside the switch statement in Java. Switch case, thank you. Switch case or switch statement. That's why we use the break statements more. If we have time, I'll go over it. But if we don't, I might add it to our next class. The only thing you will do is this. Please, if there's a question you asked and I told you we don't really have, okay, you mean the loop for break. Okay. The break in a loop statement. Okay, let's quickly go over it. Ellen, or what's your name? Is it Ellen now? Ellen, right?
Ellen.
All
Ellen.
Elian. Okay, sorry for pronouncing that wrong. All right, so let's go over the break statement. According to her, it's for loop too. So since we talked about loop, we might as well talk about it. So let's see how it works. Now, you note earlier that I told you that when you are using the loop statement, right, when you are using the for loop or while loop or whichever loop you are using, okay, the loop will basically continue executing until the condition, okay, becomes false. So a loop will keep running as long as the condition is true. It will only stop if the condition becomes false. But sometimes, for some reason, you might want to force the loop to stop. Like you just want to stop it for a reason. That is where the break statement can come in. For example, let me say I want to write a loop to write numbers from 1 to 20. Okay? So I will say console.log, let's log start. Now, if we run this piece of code here, you notice that this program writes numbers from 1 to 20. Now, let's say for some reason, immediately this program gets to 12, I want to force it to stop. Now, the only way you can force your loop to stop is to use the break statement inside of it. So what I can do is I can put a condition inside. I can say if start is equal to 12, break. What this will do is whenever start gets to 12, okay, this loop will stop running. Let's see it in action. Let's move console.log up here. If we run this now, did you see what happens? He only printed, let me delete this and rerun it so you don't see the former code with this one. Let's run that. Did you see that now? We only got from 1 to 12 because we decided to end the loop. So the break statement is used to force stop a loop. Even before the condition becomes false, you can force it to stop. That's what we use the break statements for. Do you catch that, Elian?
Yes, I do.
So you can use it inside a for loop. You can use it inside a while loop. Any kind of loop at all, it will force it to break. That is, it will force it to stop executing. All right, that's that on loops, arrays, and co. Now, after this class, if you guys will notice, I'm just trying to touch everything. There might be one or two things I leave out. I would expect after this class, those things you feel we did not really cover well, you can read up on it. At least this class has given you insight as to how they work. All right, let me see. It's almost 2, but let's see if there is a particular topic we can quickly look at. Wow, is that thing
Maybe you should do this, maybe the structuring, just an idea.
Yeah.
But I feel that the structuring has to do with you rearranging your code, much smaller version. Like
No. That's not you are talking about code refactoring.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. The structuring.
Sorry, the two names are looking funny.
Yeah.
Thanks for the correction.
It happens. Why is this thing hanging? All right, I don't know. My browser, Edge. What did you do that you are hanging now? Let me close that thing. I don't know why it's hanging, but according to our course outline, after arrays, we are supposed to talk about destructuring. Hopefully, when we are done with this, we might have to call it a day, pending our next class to continue. We talked about a lot of things we really did not plan, but it's not bad. It's still learning for us. Okay, so let's quickly talk about destructuring. Let's quickly talk about, Ellen, you raised your hand. What's up?
Yes, I was thinking, can we like do the structuring in the next class so that you settle down and explain it, because now you might just rush over it.
No. Don't worry. The structuring would not, it shouldn't take time, okay?
Okay.
All right. So the structuring. What is it about, and so on and so forth. Now, in JavaScript, okay, we have two data structure we work with most in JavaScript. So we are talking about the structuring for those of you who did not hear me. Now, in JavaScript, we have two data structure we work most with: objects and arrays. You see this data structure, we use them a whole lot, more than a lot self. Now, sometimes when you have these data structures in JavaScript, okay, for example, we know what an array is. We can create an array and say let equal to, so we can create an array here that will hold apple, comma, salad. Okay, this is an array. Example of an object, we can say let car equal to color red, make so make, we'll set make equal to, let me see, we'll set make equals to let's set make, no, Toyota is good with the make. All right, now this is an object. Mr. Friday, please help us mute your mic.
Yes. Okay.
All right, thank you. So we have an array here, we have an object here. So an array, this is it, this is an object. These are the two common data structure we work well with in JavaScript. Okay, these are the very common data structure we work with in JavaScript. Now, what exactly is the structuring? Well, with the structuring, either in array or JavaScript, what it allows us to do is to break our array items down, or even our object properties down. Now, to explain this, let's say I want to create a variable to hold the color of this car. You know, normally what we will do is what? We will say const, maybe color equal to car dot color, right? This is what we will do, right? Are we together? Hello guys, are we together?
Yes.
Hope my network is not affecting things.
No, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. So now, if we do this, of course it will work. Instead of const, let's use let. We are used to that. Let's leave const alone. If I come here and I say console.log color, if we run this, this should work fine for us. That should work fine for us. Now, perfectly, this works. But what if I also want to get the make? That means I probably have to come and do let make equals to car.make, right? Now, if we have more properties in this object, it becomes a problem creating variables with let, just to have access to all of them. A short approach we can use to do this is, watch this. With one line of code, I can say let color, comma, make equals to car. Let color, comma, make equals to car. Okay, let me comment this out. They were creating an error there. I was wondering where the error was coming from. Did you see this now? So with one line of code, I created two variables and I told it to be equals to car. Watch what happens. I can do console.log color and console.log make, and you will see that we get what we should get. What's wrong? It said car is not iteratable. Is this okay? Oh, it's an object. It's an object, not an array syntax. Sorry about that. Perfect. Did you see this now? We were able to get the color and the car, the color and the make from the car into two separate variables using just this line of code. Now, what we did here is what they will call object destructuring, which means we just basically broke, wow, I spelled that twice, which means we just basically broke the objects down into different variables in just a single line. That's basically what object destructuring is talking about. Okay, breaking down the properties of an object into variables. Okay, now this is just a typical example of this. Okay, now this destructuring came with ES6. For those of us that know what ES6 is, I don't want to spend time going into that. Okay, but the structuring came with ES6, and it's just a way for us to break our object property down into variables. That is just what the structuring is all about. Okay, that is just what the structuring is all about. So now, because we have broken this down, instead of always doing car.color or car.make, we can refer to these variables we have here, and it will give us the values we want. Now, take note, you know that this variable name is matching the name of the properties, right? Did you notice that? This variable is matching this property. The make is matching the make. Now, when you are destructuring an object, you have to make sure that the variable name you are putting matches the property name. If it does not, what you can do is this. Look at this approach. You can say, let's call this x and y equal to car. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to specify what s is referring to. So in this case, I will say s is the color, comma, y is the make. We have to comment out this line for that to work fine. Okay, so now when I'm logging it, I can console.log s and console.log y, and that should still work. You get an error. What is it saying? X. What's happening to that? Oh, is it color? Or is it the other way around? It shouldn't be. Shouldn't be. This should be X, and make should be, I think it's the other way around, is it? Let me see. Oh, it's the other way around. Sorry about that. So this color now is the color here, but we are storing it in a variable called X, and the make is also the make, and we are storing it in a variable called S. My recommendation would be this: use this first approach, where you just use the names of the properties directly. Okay, so you maintain the name of the property, you maintain the name of the property. But if you want to change the name, that's when you will use this approach. So you will just say color, which is the name of the property, but you want to refer to it as X or anything. We can say refer to it as property 1, and make could be referred to as property 2, anything you like. That means when you're printing out, you should be printing out property 1 and property 2. If you run this, it should still work fine. So that is just object destructuring. Now, sometimes you might get an error when you try to access a property that doesn't exist. Okay, you might get an error. For example, let me say I put a comma, a property that we don't have. Let's say speed. We know we don't have speed there. Speed here might be set to undefined. So let's see that in action. So we want to do the color and the make and also speed. If we run this, do you see we get undefined? Why? Because there is no speed in this object that you are destructuring. But if we add speed, let's set speed equals to 10, If we run this now, you see, speed gives us the 10 that we are expecting. All right, speed gives us the 10 that we are expecting there. Now, that is just a brief of object destructuring. This is how you destructure an object in JavaScript. That is how you destructure an object in JavaScript. Also, let's look at how to destructure an array too. Okay, let's look at an array and how to destructure it. So let's work with this array now. I'll go ahead and comment all of this out. So when you have an array like this, you can actually destructure it by saying we can do something like let, okay, so let first, comma, or let's call it fruit1, fruit2. Let fruit1, comma, fruit2 equal to the name of the array, ARR. Okay, or let's rename this array as fruits to make it more fun. So let's rename that as fruits to make it more fun. I can come here now and I say console.log, watch this. I can say fruit1. If I run this, you see it still gives me apple. Did you see that? And if I do console.log fruit2, it gives me salad. So what we have just done now, we have just destructured this array using, oops, my battery, it's my laptop not charging. Wow, sinks. All right, good. Wow. Okay, so we get apple and we get fruit, we get salad because we destructured this array of apples inside this result here. All right, so that is just the basic of destructuring. That's just the basis of destructuring an array. And this up here is when we destructure an object. Okay, so that's basically just destructuring. Of course, like I said, there might be one or two things about it that we don't really have time to discuss, but with what we have looked at here so far, we should be able to at least read up something on destructuring and understand it. Let me see if we have questions. No questions there. If you've got a question, please feel free to ask. If you've got a question, ask. No questions. Am I to just understand that we get it? Basically, what destructuring is doing is breaking down our complex objects. What is the purpose of destructuring? Well, the purpose is this. When you want to get access, okay, to the properties of an object or the items in an array, and you don't want, you know, when you are dealing with properties in an object, you have to be doing dot. If you don't want that experience of doing dot, and you just want to call it by its property name, you can destructure the object. So it will help you get rid of doing car.color or car.make. It will get rid of this for you. The array, you use square brackets. Yes, we use square brackets because it's an array that we are destructuring. When we are destructuring an object, we use curly bracelets. Okay, that's the difference between them. Square brackets when we are destructuring arrays, curly bracelets, square brackets when we are destructuring arrays, yes, and curly bracelets when we are destructuring objects. Okay, so we can use those, and this is how we do destructuring in JavaScript. This is how we do destructuring in JavaScript. If you still got questions and you can't ask it here because of time, please feel free to ask it on the group, and I myself or any other person on the group will try our best to give you an answer to that. Okay, are we together? Okay, now you have talked about spread operator. because you cannot talk about the structuring without talking about spread operator. Yeah, that's true, Emmanuel. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Spread operator. All right, let's quickly look at it. That will be the last thing we'll look at today before we call it a day. Lillian, I might not be able to recap on everything, because if I want to recap, I might be tempted to recap on everything. But if there's something you really don't get and you want a recap on, when the video is available, please, you can quickly just look it up on the platform. Okay, what I will do is I'll break the video into 2 parts or 3 parts set, so that when you can figure out, if you can figure out where you are missing, it will be easy for you to go and it will be easy for you to use the video to look up those areas you really don't understand and catch up on it. Okay, that is what I can just promise for now, but I might not be able to go through everything again because of time. I have another appointment by 3 and I want to relax before then. Okay, so Emmanuel raised a thing about somebody is saying, can we look at the structuring again next week? Yes, I will try to make out time. I will talk about the structuring, but we might not spend too much time on it again. But since you've asked twice now, we'll consider that. Okay, and for those of you who have somewhere to be, because there was somebody that said, I think he or she is going out by 2 or so, you can actually go. We won't be discussing anything again. Practically, we're done with the class. We're just going over some of those little things we want to go over.
Happy birthday in advance.
Thank you so much for that. And Emmanuel, or for those who want to learn about the spread operator, what our advice is, please read up on that, okay? I don't want to go too much into it, but it's important you know it. So you can go to Google, search for the spread operator. We basically use this to work with an array. What it does is we can use it to copy the contents or the items of an array into another array. Okay, let me give you a quick example of that. So let's say we have an array. Okay, we have an array called, okay, we already have an array of fruits. Perfect. Let's say we have another array called other fruits. Okay, and we set it equal to another array. Let's put some other fruits here. So let's go with mango and carrots. Now what I want to do is I want to combine the arrays in these fruits inside these other fruits. So that means these other fruits, I want to have mango, carrot, apple, salad. So to join these 2 arrays together, okay, what I can do is after this array, I can put a comma, and instead of writing these values out, since this array exists here, I can use the spread operator. The spread operator is 3 dots. Okay, so I can do dot and then just say fruits. What this will do is it will copy all the items inside fruits and join it with this item. So if I come down here now and I do console.log and I say other fruits here, if I run this, did you see the new array we have? We have mango, carrot, apple, salad. So because of the spread operator, it copies the contents of the other array into the new array. That's what the spread operator does. Okay?